Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, January 29th. Call to order at 6:36 p.m. First order of business, review the town planner position description.
So Brian, myself, and Mariah met last week, reviewed this, took in the info from the previous meeting, incorporated the changes, had some further discussion and revisions. I think the only thing that you put on there, Brian, was a note that we didn't add in the access to a reliable vehicle, but it's on
That
as
I
a
need to put in
notation
there.
on the side. That was the only piece that didn't get added in. I noticed that when I was reading it on my phone, but didn't realize it was a memo until I opened it up on the computer.
We're looking for the right place to make that reference.
Oh. Thank you, Otis.
And then there was a few small edits that I talked to Brian, I think, after when I looked at it, and he incorporated into here.
Correct. We added the reference to ZBA,
Yep.
clarified some language about the support to some boards and commissions and other departments. We added in the floodplain administrator, which is a new requirement under the floodplain bylaw from requirements that the federal government issued. What else do we do? We tried to clarify the special requirements for evening meetings as well as some weekend work.
I kind of think that might be the place to put it.
Yeah.
I think him and I talked about it too, and we're trying to figure out how to, but maybe just right after the
That's
driver's
all I was
license.
thinking, is a bullet.
So as a
Access to
result.
reliable transportation.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That's
that
where
makes sense.
That's where I thought it was gonna go as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Just something very simple like that.
Yep. Under skill, we just put in a little clarity around the use of the Microsoft 365 platform, and then just some experience with some public speaking and convening community groups for some of the grants and strategic planning initiatives that we do. And then I also included a draft of a position profile that we've used a similar format for some of our other searches, the chief of police, the library director. It's a common document that's issued for positions like this.
I thought that looked very good.
Excellent.
I liked the opening graphics. I think they were really,
Yeah.
they're vibrant and really tell a few stories right there.
Every once in a while, we get to do some fun stuff.
If I may, just at the, excuse me, very beginning statement of duties, the second line, I believe it should read, "and supports the day-to-day operation of planning and use."
I will make that correction.
Any other changes, questions?
No, I thought everything else was
Good.
Nope.
in line with what we talked about, and then what Scott and Brian just summarized. I think it covers it.
In the profile, did we want to incorporate like an annual budget, town budget number or not?
We absolutely can.
I don't know if we should. I'm asking the question of the group.
It is something, if it was a town administrator position, you absolutely would put that in there. You'd put in things like EQV, you'd put in things about the tax rate, so that they would understand the the foundation, all pieces of the finances of the community.
Yeah.
I think it's a helpful number to understand.
Kind of was thinking somewhere between that and, kind of a historical average capital projects has been, you know, between 500 and a couple $1 million annually.
Okay.
Just to, if you're not familiar with Erving and you're applying, it doesn't look like it has a budget that's supporting that kind of planning. I think, just from the rest of the demographics, right? It doesn't say that we operate on a north of $10 million annual budget and invest, at least historically. I know we don't know where we're going and how much we'll be able to continue, but without grants, out of pocket, et cetera, I mean, I think our 5-year average is, including the library, something like $12, $15 million or something in capital investments. It's a lot.
Okay, so we can make references to those topics under the community demographics and information section.
If that makes sense.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's a
You
good
were
point.
talking about, budget, you talking about the 19,000 that's requested for FY '25?
No, I'm talking about the annual operating budget
Of the town.
of the town. Just to, because if you take that and you take comparable sized towns with the demographics listed, you're not going to get a budget of the size that we operate under. That was my piece that I feel like, unless you dig in and look, you're not going to know on the outset if you're not familiar with the town
Right.
to that level that we're fortunate in how we get to operate for the size we are. Just from an appeal and attractiveness for that shop.
Where-
That's kind of what I was getting
I was
at.
gonna say
Yeah,
from-
where are you thinking about putting that?
In the demographics,
In the
potentially,
demographics?
just putting it as another bullet or two. You could put, 2020, FY '23, or FY '24, we know what it was, so. And you could put, either something about average capital investments. I was kind of on the fence because it varies highly and it varies by the project and where the funding came from and all that. So is the list of projects speak on its own, because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Well, it would be nice to have a candidate come and actually have done their due diligence.
Oh, yeah, I want them to see it and be interested to look, though. That I agree with the due diligence, so I don't have to go super deep, but I didn't want on the surface to be like, well, it's not big enough, enticing enough going on. That was my concern. So we could just do annual budget and the rest of it, you can figure it out if you're interested.
Yeah, I wouldn't break it down so much that you have everything in there. If you want to put an operating budget, an average operating budget of whatever it is.
Or annual tax
yeah.
budget. Okay, we'll just do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other piece is, are you comfortable with approving it tonight as amended? Because of time crunch of getting this, because we want to, we want to release this with the, the job application and all of that as one package.
Oh, yeah. Agreed. I am.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with
I mean,
moving forward.
there's some small amendments or nothing
Yeah.
I need to see again to be comfortable with. Was that a motion? Was there other discussion? And if not, was there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve, I'm going to do it as two motions, keep them separate. Make a motion to approve the position description for the town planner as amended.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye. And then I will make a motion to approve the town planner, community and position profile as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Meeting minutes. We have January 9th, December 18th, and January 8th. Just to be clear, January 9th, 23, January 8th, 24, December 18th, 2023.
Yeah, I was not at the December 18th. Or no, it wasn't that one. Which one was it?
It was January 8th.
Eight.
Oh, that's right.
Any amendments,
No amendments.
discussion?
No, the January 9th meeting, I don't believe I was present at, so I have
Okay.
no comments on the veracity.
Well, we'll take them one at a time then.
All right, so I don't have any concerns with the 9th. I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for January 9th, 2023 as presented.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll
Those
abstain.
opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
And moving right along to the next one is motion to approve meeting minutes from Monday, December 18th, 2023 as written.
Second.
All those in favor? Make a motion to approve minutes of Monday, January 8th, 2024 as written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain from that one.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Discussion regarding River Road water main break, emergency procurement. Come on up, sir. You're here, so in case there's questions in more detail. So we got a water main break on Thursday the 25th.
Correct.
We filed the decam waiver and it was approved, emergency.
Correct. The approved copies in your packet.
And that oh, never mind. That's my question is backward. I'm good.
Okay.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
I mean, there's obviously the concern that it keeps happening annually.
On the same road, on
Yeah,
the same
on the
section.
same road,
so
on the same
I assume
stretch,
same
so-
section of pipe? Or, I mean, I say
Within
same,
100
but
yards?
the same stretch?
Oh, within 100,
Feet.
150 feet?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's on the same line though,
Yeah,
right?
it-
Yeah, and it's typically.
My opinion appears to be what they backfilled it with. There's,
Yeah.
I've took some pictures, there's some rather large 40, 50, 60-pound rocks on top of
Yeah.
ductile iron pipe, which is a big no-no nowadays. And I think with the weather that we've been having, cold and warm and cold and all the rain, that the ground's just flexing so much, it's just cracking on them rocks that are in there.
I'm sure the warm and cold that we've had, we keep having every winter unseasonably,
Yeah.
Yeah.
if you will, isn't helping us. I agree with you. I think at some point when we redo that road, we're redoing water and probably sewer and
It'd be wise to do
et
everything.
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So large scope.
Yep.
Did they backfill it with different material, or did?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, everything got hauled out of there that they removed. We brought in nice clean sand to fill around the pipe immediately. We went up probably 4 feet, 5 feet with sand above the pipe, and then they backfilled with some good clean gravel, no large rocks.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped down there to check on the work on the day that it broke. I mean, you're talking, there's some
Yeah.
massive boulders that they were putting in as fill.
Underneath the pipe, on
Yeah.
top of the pipe, I mean, literally.
It makes no
touching the
sense.
pipe.
Yeah,
I don't know what they were thinking.
yeah.
Lowest cost fill available that day?
Yeah.
Who knows? It was a while ago.
I was gonna say, it was a long time ago.
About 50 years.
Yeah. That long? So,
It's ductile iron. They've stopped using straight ductile iron in the 50s and 60s. I mean, it's still around. People do use it, but most people then went to the ductile iron that's cement lined. So there's no buildup of rust and buildup from the pipe.
Yeah.
And then now everybody uses, the ductile iron with a cement line, so.
All right.
okay. And the 15 estimated, and we don't have the bill yet, but that's enough to replace our spare parts and such as well?
all the parts, everything we use is, I've ordered it on Friday, it all came in today. We're good.
We're back, okay. Not that we want to have this again, but we need to be prepared, obviously, especially.
Next year, probably at the earliest.
Oh,
Probably
stop.
Nothing this year, we're done.
Okay, you can go back to your seat now.
Well,
Anything else on this for now? Okay, we'll have to
You want
plan
that?
to probably put something on the annual or, right, to,
We
If
may
we-
not, depending on what the final
If we
costs are, we
can't,
may
yeah.
not need to.
if we don't find it in the budget.
Right.
Okay,
But you also need the vote
We do.
to waive.
If that's okay.
thank you, Pete.
I'll make a motion to waive the competitive procurement requirement for the emergency repair work for the River Road water main emergency repair work and to engage Johnson Asphalt Paving LLC and to authorize Brian Smith to execute all necessary agreements.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. And I'll keep you posted as we get those final receipts in.
Okay, great. All right. I think other than next meeting planning, we're just up for the 7 o'clock joint on budget. Anything else you guys have?
No?
Next meeting is next Monday, regular business. Anything you guys have for it that we need to add?
Yep, the 5th.
Yep.
Okay. Do you want to recess for 7 minutes?
Might as well. We can't start the joint until 7.
No. Make a motion, we recess until 7 PM.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See you in 7 minutes. Welcome back to the Select Board meeting. It is 7 PM. I will call the joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee to order. Welcome. I lost a member. Okay, well, wait a moment. I missed that. It happened quickly. While we wait for our quorum to return, if you'd like to come up, Michelle, you are first up once we get going. Hi. Just give us a moment or two here. Okay. You are up first. Welcome. I, of course, didn't scroll to the right place, but
I wouldn't be so quiet if the camera wasn't here as soon as. I'm gonna try not to be my goofball self on television, so.
it's any consolation. It took a while, but we all got used to it too.
So how do we begin?
Anything you specifically want to cover? Any changes that you wanted to highlight?
No, our office is pretty well easy to focus on what we do and what we should be doing. Doesn't change much from year to year. So therefore, there aren't a lot of goals, new changes. So the budget is level funded except for increases in COLAs, in our wages. So it was pretty simple other than the line item changes that we made, the adjustments to fit the new software better and keep track of the items in a nicer way. So I guess I'd ask you guys if you have any questions.
I don't.
The only thing that I had for taxes is, and this may not be the time for this discussion, but consideration of increasing the late fee.
Oh, the $5 late fee?
Right.
So I was kind of embarrassed when I read this narrative again because I realized I just brain dumped a whole bunch of stuff into those couple of categories. It's like you asked a question, sure, I'll like throw out all different kinds of scenarios. So that's one scenario when you talk about how we could raise revenue. That's one option. You could raise the demand fee on delinquent excises from the $5. Most communities, I mean, I think they're larger communities, are at 15. And it's not going to bring in a ton of revenue, but it would bring in something. But it's not necessary. You know what I mean? It's not going to bring in enough to. It's nothing I'm advocating for. It's just something I'm saying is an option.
Could I ask,
Do-
how many roughly demand fees are there, like 100 a year or something, or just some guesstimate?
Well, the first commitment of excise is roughly, I don't know, 2,000, or are we doing it? Not even.
No, I just mean the demand fees for people who didn't pay.
Right, and then you probably send out demands on 10% of those. So throughout the year, there's probably at least 300 demand bills. I mean, I could look into it at any time you wanted to talk about it.
It's larger than I would have expected.
More or less?
More than I would have expected.
We're all forgetful, we pile.
I was guilty as charged.
I'm sure I have been too.
I was just gonna say, I mean,
First time in probably 20 years that I was late.
We all get busy.
I did it. I confess.
Who sets that fee? Is that us? You? Us? Okay.
Yeah, it hasn't changed since I've been here since 2011. I don't know when it came into existence, but it
Sure.
would definitely take a vote of some sort.
Okay.
And those demand fees go to where?
To the town.
To the town? Okay,
Yeah.
so
general fund.
I thought so, but I want to be clear. Some people might think they go to you. And
Right.
I want to be clear that they don't go to you. It's fine. Yeah, okay.
Other questions? Tax budget? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Deb, come on up.
Well, really the major increase here is in the software fees. The new software is quite a bit more expensive than the other. We're just getting into it now, and it seems like it's gonna be doing a lot more than the other did, so there's a lot of features. It's very feature-rich, and we're just going through the conversion of getting it running smoothly, and that's gonna take a bit of time, but I think it's going quite well. There is an overlap here, if you see in the notes. I kept this soft-right fee in there. We could possibly consider dropping it. At the time that I made up the budget, I wasn't confident that we wouldn't need to be looking back at things, getting reports from that, because we're doing a conversion in the middle of the year. We can like PDF everything and get our records that way, but it's not an efficient way to do it. So I kept it in there. In the meantime, I've come up with a strategy to get more of the things that I would normally be searching through the old software to segregate, to make them go into the new ones for the special funds. I can't really describe it all in detail because you'd have to be there.
Yep.
But, so I think I could probably maybe discuss it more thoroughly with Brian, whether we could or possibly drop that soft-right fee. The other major thing in the budget really isn't me. The accounting and auditing services is for the audit and the OPEB study. So then you're left with what says office supplies, but really we need to flesh out that category. It should also include services. Like there was a $100 fee for this company with the new software that will just do the 1099s, mail them, print them, everything. And it was under $100. By the time you buy the forms and the envelopes and the postage and the ink and the frustration, it's well
You had
worth
me at
it.
less than 100.
It's well worth it. The other thing that could be in here is meetings, but out of that $1,500, I can pretty much do everything that I need to do, because if I need office supplies, I steal them from other departments.
We won't
Well,
quote you on
not
that.
steal them, but, very, very little. do I
They're
use,
borrowed.
really.
You're honest.
Commandeered.
Well,
is
Share-
no,
sharing the
No, I
resources.
ask first, I go, hey Betsy, what's in that supply closet? We're gonna roll the ad machine tape there, and that's about all I really need, sometimes some file folders, yeah. So it's not a big budget. The bigger items are really the outside subscriptions and outside services. And for revenue, I don't take in any revenue, and there's no way that I'm gonna.
It's probably better that way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't touch any incoming money at all.
Yeah.
I was just going to
So-
comment on a couple of
Go
points. The approximate amount of that, the old subscription that you kept for one more year, about 14, 15,000, somewhere in that
Yeah.
range.
Correct.
And then my only comment on that is the overall budget dropped because we didn't have to purchase another software. So that, you see a decrease on that already. I would hate to not have the accessibility and then create hours and hours of scrolling work, sifting through PDFs to find the document you need, when right now you can run the report, it's there. Until we get fully integrated and changed, I think it makes sense to have them both, and until you know that you are 100% operational and functional on the new program. So that's just my thought. I would recommend keeping it until we're at that stage.
We should know closer, probably to May, June, where we are with the conversion.
Another thing that I don't know if they would consider is like just a half year.
I was just going to ask the
keeping
same
it through
thing.
December. We
You know,
could ask.
Give us another 6 months from July until next November.
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah,
Always-
because a lot of times, with the year-end close and the reports for the state that are done in the fall,
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
it's easier to be able to run the detail
Yep.
off of the old system, which half of the year will be in.
Right.
I don't know if we also pay by user count too. We could go down to one probably. If,
I can double check
that's
on that
part
as
of
well.
it.
Yep.
You
We
know,
can
some
check on
different
both of
ways
those.
to go there, but
Excuse me, I didn't hear that.
I don't know if we are licensed by user count. We could go down to one user probably by summer.
There's a piece of it that is by user, because we all have the remote license. But we could probably drop down to one.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's a
I
fair
don't
point.
know if you'd need access to it for historical things, for budget
I think by the time that
purposes.
we get to that point, I think the concern that you raise is a good one. When Debbie goes to do the end of the year work in August and September and close us out for October, she's gonna need to potentially reach back into some of the history, and having access to that would be beneficial. So that's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we also may be concurrent seats, not users. So I think it's how many people can be in there at once. If that's what it is, then only having one in there at once after July 1st is probably fine. So we can look at some ways to maybe reduce it without removing it.
And then there's the consideration for the treasurer's office too,
course.
that payroll information that's in there.
We're gonna need
So
to,
she'd need to weigh in on that too.
yeah, we'll have to work, and obviously when Jen gets up, we can talk about it, but we will have to work to make sure that we can get employment records when there's an inquiry that comes in, and she needs to go back and look at historical information. We're gonna have to save those reports in a way that she can search for what she needs to be able to answer those questions efficiently, so.
It's got to be some kind of data dump we can get. We should be able to.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree. I tend to agree, though. We're
Yeah,
crossing
it
over
does.
fiscal year and a calendar year. If we need to keep it one more year to be efficient, then
Yep.
so be it.
If we can reduce it, great, but I think getting rid of it to save that would be penny wise and pound foolish, as the saying goes.
Yep,
We
I agree.
spend a lot of time scrolling through PDFs otherwise, and that has a cost in itself.
Agreed.
All right. That's
Anything
all I
else?
got.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, come on up. What's that?
I didn't know it was me or Dick.
You are next.
You are next.
You are the next contestant.
What do I win?
10 minutes. 10 minutes of
Careful
time.
what you wish for. Scroll down there.
You want to start off with the treasurer's budget and then go to benefits after that?
Sure, yeah.
Nothing's really changed except for just salaries on the salary and wages end, and then the expenses that are level funded, it's just broken down this year. So it's 5,500 last year, and it would remain the same. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on the treasurer's budget. Straightforward.
Actually, it's kind of related to the last one, I forgot to ask it. The accounting software is all carried in the accountant's
It
budget,
is,
right?
it is,
Not
yeah.
in, okay,
Correct.
that's what I thought.
Same with the auditing, that's town-wide
But we're
for
just
both of
carrying
those
it in,
expenses.
right. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Questions?
As far as revenue goes for the treasurer's office, I just brought this, a couple of the statements. Can just let you know what we made in interest last year and just on our bank accounts.
Good.
So for Unibank, we made $5,000, $5,087. And for the co-op, our total was $144,306.72. So basically like $150,000 just in interest for the bank accounts, the operating bank accounts. And that doesn't include, obviously, our stabilization account.
That's just on the operating funds.
It's just on the operating funds, yeah. And I would like to actually branch out a little bit more and even just take some of those funds and roll them into some CDs because interest rates are pretty still attractive. So I'd like to increase that number for next year.
Great. I'd like that interest return.
Yeah, I know when I see the investment account, just someone's-
144.00 is more like what I see. Anything else on? Okay, yeah, on to benefits.
In your packets, there should have been an updated benefit sheet because the retirement costs changed.
For us, it's like at the top by the
Yeah,
revenues,
it's up,
right?
it's up in the
Right.
top, right after revenue.
Yep.
I actually have, I printed out two, I kind of just did an analysis of our health insurance benefits. I just have the breakdown for you all to take a look at it. You're welcome. I can send it to you digitally too if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you just send it to us all, we'll have it, thank you. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
So it just gives you a breakdown of all of our current enrollments for health insurance, and then on the bottom half, the dental and life insurance. We still have 8 employees who newly hired had not taken the benefits, but they had expressed that they possibly wanted to enroll during open enrollment. So I wanted to hold those funds for those employees for the following year. And then incorporated 2% increase. Our meeting is on Wednesday, so we won't find out our actual increase on the health insurance until then. I tried to send out an email and get some information tonight, but I got no response. So once we get those totals, I can absolutely update. And I went all the way up to 6%, and the unforeseen additions, there's probably about 2 additional employees at the highest amount. That would just eliminate that if we went to like almost a full 6% increase, but I don't anticipate that's what they were going for, because that's what I believe it was last year we had a pretty hefty increase. And the MedX rates didn't go up that high as well, so.
So the requested is assuming a 2%, the 8 potential and 2 additional?
Yep.
Okay.
And again, there was 8 and those 2 additions, those are on the high end too. So I feel like if the percentage is higher, we still have a little bit of wiggle room too, because I can't imagine everybody's gonna go for the family PPO. You just don't know.
Does the 8 include the open police officer position?
Yep, open police officer and the van driver, and then 6 newly hired employees this year.
Questions on that?
Not necessarily about this, but about benefits with Union 28. There was, and this is going to come totally out of left field, so I know you probably will not have an answer this evening. There was talk at a school committee meeting that with some of their grants, certain benefits have been included within those grants. And it sounded like Union 28 thought that the town had, felt that the town had been reimbursed, but apparently on the town side, there was a question as to whether that reimbursement had taken place or not. Do you know if any of that has been resolved or straightened out, or?
I hadn't watched many school committee meetings recently.
Sure.
However, one of them was resolved, and I think that the second one was clarified, so
Okay.
I believe we are all set.
Okay,
But, yeah.
thank you.
Could I ask about this total budget impact, 172,665.98? That total budget on what budget? On the insurance budget, on the overall budget? What does it impact on?
That, the 172, that was the total impact. That is the additional 8 employees. So that line right there is 8 employees, the monthly amount, 12 months, the yearly amount, and then so the total impact, budget impact is for those 8 employees.
Okay.
And that's for, that's incorporating the, if they were to take the health insurance, life insurance, and dental.
And those, I know you said this, I just want to make sure I'm hearing it correctly. Those are all anticipated hires that they're actively looking for currently.
Nope, 2 of them are.
Just 2 of them
Just
are.
the 2 of them, yeah.
Okay.
And then 6 are ones that did not take any benefits. They expressed that they wanted to, but they were waiting to open enrollment.
So they're new employees in fiscal '24, right?
Yep.
Who didn't opt at hire, but
Right.
expect to at open enrollment?
Yep, they had filled previous positions.
And then you have capacity for 2 new hires throughout the entire town.
Or just plan changes. Somebody in
Yeah.
the lower plan does something higher because they have a life event.
Because we're taking actual plus 8.
Yeah,
That's
because the
all
plus
right.
8, I think we're okay. So, all right, I just wanted to make sure that there was enough for future hires. I know there was discussion about whether or not we were gonna carry 2, 3, 4 plan capacity, but,
That was the hope. Again, if you wanted to increase that, but
no,
I
you
felt
mean,
like this is.
like you said, you use those 8 and they're all at the maximum, just shy of 22,000. And looking at the breakdown, that's not what everybody chooses. So I think the likelihood is, even if all 8 were taken, there's a chance they not all would take the highest $22,000 plan. Therefore, you'd have a little bit of capacity in there to add to the already 45,000 or so built in. So, okay.
Can I just add to Deb's question? If a department has a staff person that is eligible for benefits and that can be charged back to the grant, if it's not an upfront budgeted item that Jen and Deb can account for and put it into the grant budgets that would be on the accounting system, and the employee qualifies and is eligible for health insurance, we have to attribute it to this budget. If that is reimbursed at the end of the fiscal year, which is what I believe happened in this last case, it doesn't come back to the budget, it comes back to the general fund as free cash. So it doesn't actually alleviate any maybe stressors on this budget. If instead it's known up front, it's possible to set up a grant fund and track those fringe benefit costs to the grant and then wait for reimbursement in that situation. So depending on which department it is and what they're working on, the grant requirements, the contractual obligations, that's something that we could do. But the way that the current one worked, we have to fund it up front and maybe get reimbursed after the fact. And I think we got that as we were closing the books. So that doesn't create any relief on this budget. And I'm not sure what those plans are in the school or other departments going forward.
And this might not be, this is just for next time conversation.
Yep.
Is there a way that we can work towards knowing that information up front so we can create it and have relief on this budget rather than the after effect?
It would require that whomever is submitting the grant and developing the grant budget, because that's put in before the award is made and before the hiring happens. So it would be in those preliminary drafting stages. I would hope that those department heads would reach out to the financial offices and let them know what their intentions are so that we can set things up correctly. Trying to deal with it on the back end sometimes doesn't always result the way that people think it will. And so we would have to have some of those preliminary conversations up front when there's a grant opportunity that they would like to pursue. And we can definitely work with departments if they have questions about how to structure grant applications and the budgets that go along with them. Absolutely.
On the flip side, or maybe ancillary to that, I was thinking there's an item on the list for future potentially is, can we find a way to track what was reimbursed for some of these different expenses? Because there's some others that we talked about maybe in the last meeting that are revenue generating, but they would be to the general fund, so they're not offsetting to, they would end up there, they wouldn't be offsetting to the expense. If we're coming into a budget season and we have a sense of what we got reimbursed for, we at least understand how much money in free cash was offsetting to operating budget. Because I often sit here, and I think all of us tend to agree that we shouldn't operate on free cash, shouldn't be an operating fund source, but at the same time, if it's a reimbursement for operating expenses that's in free cash, because that's how it has to happen or how it did happen, it'd be good to know.
That's a fair
I'm not
question.
saying that that means we should necessarily then turn around and put it into the operating cost for the coming year, but maybe we should at some point. If there's enough of it there, maybe it's we're getting $200,000 a year in reimbursed costs that are operating costs, and maybe we consider supplementing if needed, because that is more of a operating funds coming in late. Anyhow, just to even
Absolutely.
tracking it and understanding it, to know if
Yeah.
there's any value in it.
I was thinking about the purpose of tracking it, listening to Michelle speak earlier. It's not a lot of money, but in a very small budget, you're talking about like a $1,500 annually that is not really captured anywhere other than it was returned to the general fund. So being able to show that revenue and
Yeah.
where it's attributed, where it came from.
We could do a breakdown of our revenue sources and what that looks like over the year.
Maybe something to track for FY25.
We probably do track it, it's probably just doing the analysis, right?
Deb and Jen track probably hundreds of revenue line items. So yes, there's level of detail. We don't
Okay.
typically, we're rarely asked for that, so we typically just report it as an aggregate. But
Right.
if you wanted more definition, we could give you a definition.
With the new software, the reporting is amazing.
Okay.
Okay. So yes, it sounds like for this,
Yes.
this coming year.
The revenue report for the end of last fiscal year. has
Oh, that's
various
true, too.
categories.
Yeah.
So
that'd be
Debbie's end
good.
of the year revenue report, we've got that. We'll go to the revenue tab. I can
Yeah.
share that again.
Yeah,
You
if you
sent that
could
out
just
back in
resend it.
November. I think it was like November you sent it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the year, well, I can't remember, but
Yeah, I can send that back out too. That would be a good place to start.
Yeah,
To
we'll
start?
there.
Yeah, I'll send it out to the FinCom as well.
Anything else for the treasurer? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, I know you said no more questions, but you all noted the change to the retirement contributions that was in this week's packet? Okay, excellent.
You noted that you called out the increase?
Yes, well, that wasn't there before, that was new information.
I believe the report that we're talking about that Deb sent out was sent on November 3rd, looks like.
That sounds right.
Town Report 2023.
Thank you. Mr. Newton, come on up. We'll start with elections or town clerk?
Yes.
Perfect.
Have at it.
Okay.
We'll start with town clerk then. It's in
I
order.
don't think I have a lot to add to what I've already submitted, just kind of a reminder that I do have 2 accounts that I guess would be viewed as capital accounts. Not asking for any money for them this year. One of them is the general code codification project. I asked that that money remain intact so that we can pay them when the project is done. We've made some payments already. And the other one is for permanent records restoration. I think at this point this year, I don't think there's been any money used in those accounts, but there certainly will be on the permanent records. I have somebody coming in March to pick up some books to be done, and I don't know what the cost on that will be until they come in, they analyze them and all of that, but, so that will be happening. I don't think that we need to put any money aside, because we've got over $100,000 in that account right now. So I think that we don't need any money in there for next year. We'll see how much they use going forward. And this has been open now for a few years to other departments. I've let other folks down at the town hall know, and I think Jackie's getting some together, and maybe Michelle. I don't remember now for sure if she had any, but, and Jen, they all know that the lady's coming to make some records permanently bound, so. So I had asked that those 2 accounts remain pretty hands-off, if you will, since the money was already in there. And the other thing, I guess, as you probably read in my submissions here, is that basically I level funded everything except 3 accounts: the wages account, the election wages account, and the cost of elections. As you're well aware from hearing me blabber from year to year, election costs vary from year to year because of the number of elections that happen within a fiscal year. And this fiscal year coming up, there will be the town election, right? And there would be the state primary, the presidential election. Oh joy, I'm looking forward to that. So it'll be three major elections happening, and so that's the reason for the increase on that account. Last year we budgeted for 2, right? So if I remember correctly, so that is that, and then the wages were adjusted according to the newly approved wage table, so you know, those numbers were used for that. So I guess other than that, I don't have any, unless you have questions, you know, but I try to be as thorough as I can be when I give you information. Yes?
Can I ask a question about mail-in ballots?
Yep.
Does that alleviate anything?
No, it actually costs the town more.
Oh,
Because we get to mail the ballots at cost to you, you know, the taxpayer. But when it comes back, well, I suppose it's still the taxpayer cost, but that cost is subsidized by the state, right? Because it's a
Postage paid.
postage prepaid envelope that I put in there. And so the state has literally set up an account for every single city and town in Massachusetts, so that they all get charged. But so far, the Secretary of State's office has been footing that bill.
okay.
Yeah.
So why would that cost us more?
It costs us more because I have to pay the initial packet out to you. That's all. I mean, not a big to-do necessarily, because I think the cost is like 81 cents for the packet or something like that, although the new rates went up. But the quantity that I sent out in the presidential election, I'm going from 4 years ago, the presidential election, 50% of the people in town voted by mail. That was a significant amount of, you know, dollars out for postage. You know, now that's not directly out of my budget, but it is out of the town budget. The select board maintains the postage machine and the money in it, but it does obviously increase that expense.
Do the return of the ballots to you, is that more time?
What's more
for
time for me to process
people
them,
to-
yeah,
okay.
but
All
it's,
right.
I'm salaried, right, basically, so it doesn't matter if I put in 10 hours or 100 hours, it's, I try to get the work done, so.
So no savings.
Yeah,
More cost maybe, but no savings.
yeah. Thank you.
My only question was just on the capital account for permanent records.
On the what records?
The permanent records,
Yeah.
the binding and all that. Once you have this one done, can you just give us an idea of how often, maybe the last 3 times we did it and how much it's cost? Just to kind of get an idea on like how is that trend?
Sure, I will try to do that.
Building up 100 is a 3 years worth of binding or whatever that is, just so we have some idea for the future for planning. If you would.
The other thing to think about is whether or not the program, I mean, we've gradually expanded the program. Originally, it was all basically town clerk stuff. Then it expanded into the other offices. Are there other departments in town that are required by the state to keep records permanently, Do we want to expand the program to those things as well, if there is that requirement? I don't even know, to be honest. And then, do you want to do anything to any of the paper that is at the Historical Society? You might want to preserve some of that paper. I don't know.
Okay.
Just a thought, and I would have no idea what the volume would be without talking with folks that are involved in those things.
I think they're starting to do some stuff, so maybe we can collaborate if that comes up.
Yep.
Could you put that just as an item, like as we get a sense of that, frequency and cost, then we can also just do an internal audit of, are we capturing all the necessary permanent records currently as a future task?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions?
None.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hope you have an early evening.
Trying to stay on time. That's early. I don't know about that. Conservation Commission is up next. Mark, thank you.
Just in time.
Welcome.
I hope I'm not missed at the other meeting.
We'll be quick.
So I just start with I haven't heard the format that's being for it. Just start with the description.
Initiatives and
Yeah, goals, initiatives, any
Okay.
budget changes of significance, and that's
So
that.
during the past year, we finished up the survey, got the plots merged as one. We've done some trail rerouting and marking up of our boundaries so that people know when they're coming onto our property. And we've had a couple of hikes led by others, most notably birds and winter tracking. It's amazing the number of animals that have been out recently up there. We've also spent a lot of time on RDA's request for determination, and mostly those have been homeowners. A few homeowners have come and said, what do we do about this? And there's a stream right behind us. And there's also been some more substantial NOIs done in relation to the town and culverts. And there's more coming up with work on Route 2, which will be quite significant, as well as Bridge Street and Maple Avenue, the work there. And so our hope in the future is to get a bit more in the way of educational programs going through the library, possibly through the school. We've had an inquiry from the police department for one. We also have in the past and would hope to in the future to do more with pollinator gardens and the like at a couple of places. Let's see. We also can sponsor some evening meetings. We hope to do more with that. Some of the people who can come in and give presentations through the library. Now, we're also looking at getting ourselves more educated. There are courses offered through a state association of conservation commissions that would give us more insight into the rules and the regulations and the purposes of the conservation regulations. There's also a major change coming up on wetland rules and regulations that takes into account the focus on carbon sequestration, on with wetlands, and also the increased rainfall and damage caused by stream flows. And so there's new standards on culverts, and there's new standards on all of that, and that's in the process of getting put together and promulgated, and we'll have to become aware of it. So in terms of finances, we have some of our finances covered by applicants. So if you apply for an RDA, you pay for the advertising, which is about the only cost. We have to pay for consultants to come in and do wetland assessments where necessary. Although some of the bigger projects, they come with engineers that are quite competent. We also have available to us without any cost I almost started saying some other things, but I won't. Anyway, we have what's called a circuit rider who comes around, we submit documents to, and he makes sure we're doing things the right way. And he can be very helpful. And again, he is at cost. We don't have to pay for him at all. At the moment, our budget for next year is pretty much going to be exactly the same in terms of total, but we are trying to shift things around, put some additional resources into education and the training, our own training. We may also invest more in trail work because some of the work that needs to get done on the trails in the Poplar Mountain area are require significant unique pieces of equipment. So we'll have our training. We'll have some changes there with trails. And we've got potentially some additional trips and educational opportunities. Finally, we have made efforts to offer other departments and other committees and commissions in town to help sponsor events that relate to our goals. And we will draw on our funds that are in our budget to some extent, but we're also looking at a savings account that was established a long time ago and hasn't been touched at all. And, we're looking at that as a source of, if somebody comes along and says, we want to have Riccardi come in and give us his birds of prey speech or something. And we're also looking at transferring a portion of that money to the school committee to help their field trip budget. So those things have yet to be decided and laid out, but that's sort of where we're headed with them. Any questions?
When you say, Mark, that you'd be transferring to the school committee to assist with their field trip budget, would that be for a very specific field trip? Would it be a conservation themed trip?
That would be for field trips that meet our goals of education around conservation, wildlife, and to some extent possibly even Erving, natural history.
And was this something that you approached them about, or they approached you about?
We approached them.
Okay.
And it's not a done deal yet. Their budget's not set exactly where it should be. We have to figure out how that actually would happen, financially, but, that is, it seems like it would be more in line to take the money and give it to them, so it's in their budget, and it lowers what their their cost is, then it would be to have them have to take their ideas, come to, first to their principal, then to us, and have us vote on, that it would be much more straightforward to say, for trips like this, for activities like this, here's an additional amount of money in your line.
Okay. I guess to be honest, that particular item surprises me, knowing that field trips are fully funded through the school's budget. So I would kind of question, especially with the budget increases they've received, why they would need that additional funding through the Concom. And I would think that some of your trust fund funding, for lack of a better word, could be used. I would assume the Conservation Commission could use it for things like trail maintenance and things like that. And so I would just question the need for the school to be having that funding from you guys.
I think the idea came from the overall idea of cutting their budget back. And if you're going to cut some funds, but you want them still to do this sort of thing, you want to give them the option that they can do as much as they can come up with. And I also think that if they're not going to use it, they wouldn't get to keep it. We have to figure the ins and outs of that. It's not a done deal. It's not a simple thing. It's difficult to figure out how to say, well, come to us if you want money to do something. That seems to put a lot of hoops in line.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Very.
I would only think, if,
Somewhat similar to Deb in that I'd like to see them use their own budget for their field trips that's already in there before, they start taking your trust fund money. I'm just a little confused.
So I'll speak to it a little bit, and I know Mark wears two hats, so he's also on the school committee.
Probably more than
And
that.
at the
Yeah, I
meeting,
didn't bring that other hat with me.
yeah. So I was, as the liaison, I was at a couple of budget meetings that the school committee had. And when it was brought up, it was actually Mark who had suggested, they were looking for ways to streamline, because the request from everybody was if there's little pockets here and there that you could cut out of your budget. The original proposal was, instead of proposing that and pulling it, you would still propose it just like you normally would for a field trip. If it was something that would meet the criteria for Concom, the suggestion was have the front office from the school, instead of attributing it directly to a line item, request to see if it meets the category for Concom and have it funded through that. And if so, then they could use that funding source to pay for it to offset some of the costs. And conversely, they were going to assume that some of that would happen, and they would lower that line item budget. And you wouldn't see an increase in line item budget for this one, so therefore it is an overall saving to the town each year that happens. So that was the original proposal. It's, I think what Mark is talking about is, the complexity and the timing of having to do that, and to make sure that you can, we're not talking about major, field trips, but the small ones that would fall under that category of Concom. So that's where that came up. I know he's trying to be very eloquent about, he wears two hats. So in his role as school committee, he had offered to try and reduce the budget, and as the role as ComCom said, if we reduce this entity over here might be able to offset some of that if you can apply and ask for it.
And I get it and I appreciate it, but on the same token too, the Conservation Commission has their own expenses,
Yep.
and they have projects and such that they want to do, and would be my assumption that is what that savings account trust fund was developed for. And Erving Elementary should be able to afford and pay for their own field trips. They should not be having to go to another board or commission to ask for that.
You are not going to argue with me, and what I said at the meeting was I think they should keep their budget at $10,000 for field trips as it's currently budgeted, and they shouldn't bother with doing this and do it as a trial if they want, if that works. So it came out of a good spot that somebody was trying to help out and not out of, trying to subvert a budget.
No, absolutely, and I think it's wonderful that the Conservation Commission is willing to do this. I actually wish more boards could work together with different organizations and do things like this and have this type of a cooperative relationship. I just don't think our elementary school needs to have assistance with funding those kind of things.
It just feels a little odd. It's almost like they're applying to conservation for a grant. You know?
I
So
would say
let
that,
me interrupt. This is a
Okay.
little in the weeds. I
Yep.
completely agree that, I tend to agree that school budget should be able to afford this. The Concom budget's not even 0.25% of the school budget. In full. Anyhow, we can ask more about that when we review the school budget.
Yep.
It's a good item to have on the
Sorry.
list, and I just want to make sure there was no other questions,
I
and
have
just in sense of time.
One 30-second question before we move on. Do you believe that the $1,100 requested for memberships and trainings is enough to accomplish the State Association for Concom classes, the wetland classes?
yes,
Okay.
there's a
That-
lot of trainings that are also available free that relate to portions of what we do.
Short and simple, yes. I just
I
wanted
did
to make
wanna-
sure that we had it, so.
I did want to add one thing here, that there's a history of the Conservation Commission doing small projects for the elementary school and the library and others in the way of gardens, trails, and a number of other things where they have turned around and have asked us, and we have done things in the past. So while this is much bigger in number, there's a lot of history for that kind of activity. And honestly, our last meeting got canceled, so we haven't had a meeting where the rest of the Conservation Commission can say, Mark, that was a good idea, or Mark, that was a lousy idea. Okay? Any other questions?
I think the spirit of it is a good idea, but I think we'll see how other departments' budgets shake out before we start digging into pockets.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll go back to
Thank
my
you.
other meeting.
Brian, could you just put on the list, just, I'd like to understand the trust, if there are stipulations, because if it's depending on what that funding came from, may have a constraints, and what the balance is. Please. Okay. I was gonna ask, but I didn't want to extend
That
it.
new software, huh?
Come on up, Mariah. We can come back to it after. Thank you.
All right,
Go ahead. Welcome.
thanks. Last year was my first time having a department with an operating budget. I think it went pretty well. This year's request is pretty much the same, just a few slight changes and COLA and things like that. With my departure in March, obviously, I'm going to be handing this over to someone else, but I think it should be pretty sufficient. And I have a handful of substantial capital requests.
Any questions on the operating portion?
I didn't see anything.
No questions other than your very last bullet in your write-up under highlights and challenges, and maybe it's just mine, but your sentence cut off after, but some, I'm assuming the word is trainings, and then there's a continuation of that.
The seminars and meetings account, but some, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
It should be, but some trainings may cost a significant amount of money, but only needed every handful of years.
Okay, yeah, it cut off with TRA, and then just,
Yeah.
there was no more.
Yeah, for example, I just took like a grant writing training class. That's not something that you would typically take every year, but when you do pay for those things, it's a significant chunk of money up front.
On to the capital items.
Yes, please.
On to the capital items.
All right, IPMO, I think we've talked about this ad nauseum. Shared use path, I actually would like to alter that request, reduce it. So I had requested $6,800. I was filling out my grant application for that, which I'd also like your blessing to submit this week. And I'm able to use town planner time as a match. So we can reduce that to 4,500.
I'm sorry, where are you with that?
The shared use path,
Pardon?
the shared use path,
Okay.
Is it 4,500?
yeah.
It's quite a ways down. It's below all the
I don't know
and
in
below.
your booklet.
It's probably in
Open
the way
space.
far end of the packet.
It is. It's down there quite a bit.
Yeah, so I have a grant application written, and I had checked with Scott and Brian. We figured that we'd just talk about it briefly tonight, since it's hopefully a quick item. But it's a project that I could hand off to the next person if you chose to accept it. If we were awarded and then you chose to accept it. There's a lot of steps in between.
So that 6,800 goes down to 4,500 and like in kind for the rest.
Yeah. And I counted for 4 hours a week for 24 weeks of of someone's staff time.
Did capital have a recommendation?
Capital has not made any recommendations on any capital projects as of yet.
My request is
Let
just
me
to
re-
submit the.
I understand, but
Okay.
that needs to be a recommendation. We want to even engage on the project if we're going to ask for the funds. Because I don't really think people are comfortable rejecting the funds when we have to decide if we're ready to do the project after we've applied. Unfortunately, but everybody sits here and says, I'm going to turn down money, and I don't think anybody's comfortable sitting there saying that maybe it's not the capacity at the right time, et cetera. Not this one, but just in general about projects. So I was just looking for, rephrase that. Does capital have a recommendation on whether or not to apply for a grant for this project?
I'm not.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure if they've already indicated that they haven't weighed in on any of them, how they could make a recommendation if they haven't spoken with the boards, spoken with the people that were doing it to find out that capacity. You talked about the overarching capacity, but you haven't had that dialogue, so you're asking to weigh in on something that they haven't had discussions on. So when I met with Mariah, the ask, and I disagree in the fact that people don't want to turn down money. I don't think the people that are, if we are awarded a grant, it happens quite often where we've applied for a grant, you can get awarded the grant, and you say, maybe when we applied, we thought we could do it, and now we don't have the capacity. Thank you. We're gonna pass on this for various reasons, for whatever they may be. I don't think there's any harm in applying. It's very low lift, low effort to see if you even get it. If you do get it, then you can engage in that conversation and say, this is what the scope is, this is what the contribution would be, this is what the amount would be. Do we have the capacity at this time, now that we know we have the award? If you don't get the award, it's move on. There's nothing to talk about. I'd rather figure out if we have the award before we put in the time and the task to figure out if we have the capacity. Because you're front-loading the work to figure out if you have the capacity, and then you don't even know if you have the award yet. So I look at it a little bit backwards from the way you were looking at it. I'd rather see if we have the funds first, and then see if we have the capacity, if we have the funds available.
One second. Understood, but I asked if they wanted to, because they can if they want to, and I'm on it, and I know we did hear them, and we have discussed them. We haven't made any recommendations yet. Doesn't mean we haven't talked about the projects and or asked follow-up questions from the departments. So, and I hear you on part of that, but it's no different than asking us tonight to authorize a grant award that we haven't had, seen, or talked about before tonight either as the board. So I think it's the same thing. Please, go ahead.
I guess I'm struggling from the capital standpoint. It hasn't come up at all tonight, but just at your last meeting, the three of you gentlemen literally talked about scaling back and not doing as much and curtailing what projects are being done. And now, yes, I understand this is not for a huge sum of money, but it is a project. It is a project that will require time, will require effort, and we as capital haven't reviewed it, I don't believe, to our full review process. So it does kind of feel like we're having something put in front of us and we're being told, yes or no, now make a decision. That's very difficult when literally at your last meeting, the conversation was that you three are going to start scaling back and you want to pull back on projects. And although I have not had the time yet, my first thought was to email all of you and say, well, then you need to provide us with a list of what you feel are priorities. Because you're dumping all of that on capital to set those priorities and determine what those projects are moving forward. But we're not getting a lot of feedback from the Board of Selectmen as to what you feel are priorities. And every grant that goes forward, yes, I'm sorry, but as a member of this board, there is a pressure that if that funding is received, that we are expected to accept that funding and move forward. And I would push back on that and say, when is the last time the town of Erving turned down a grant? Because I don't feel it happens very frequently.
Am I incorrect in that 4,500 is less than our threshold of 5 anyway?
Correct.
So,
It wouldn't fall under capital.
Project is though. The project's 34. So whether we're spending 4,500 or not, the project's a $34,000 project that we're engaging in.
Got it. So it's in kind.
I mean, to me, I think the in-kind, number one, because it is 6,800, it's just in kind for the difference between 45 and 68, correct?
Say that again?
The difference between the 6,800 and the 4,500 is the in-kind
the effort.
Correct.
hours, so it is 6,800 of equivalent town investment. Okay.
Good,
And
but
just that the overall project scope is larger than.
I know we had talked in the past about having money in an account for matching grants. Did we ever do that? We talked about it. I
It
don't know.
got shot down.
It did get shot down, okay.
I think it came out of the 24 budget.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
part of an article that had other things on it.
Oh,
Okay.
So Deb, while I agree that historically our process has been different, we've made those decisions early on to apply for a grant with the knowledge that if we get it, we're going to forge forward with it. And I'm thinking the philosophy of honoring what we said about seeing what projects we do still comes to play. It just comes after we figure out if we get the grant. And I'm, for one, am fine with saying we got the grant, but situations have changed. A new staff member who doesn't have the capacity to do that is in here. Whatever reasons, whatever happens, we turn it down. I would be fine with turning something down and saying, when we applied, it was foreseeable that we may, or we had no knowledge whether we would or we wouldn't. We wanted to wait for the award to dive in and put it on the agenda and talk about it and check capacity and set a plan in motion for what that looks like. It's different than what we've done, but we're talking about doing things differently than the way we've done them in the past. This falls in line with maybe changing the philosophy a little bit instead of just front-loading and saying, we'd love to do this project and we have the capacity, let's apply for it. So now we've earmarked our time, we've earmarked our money, we apply for it, we don't get the grant, and then we're like, how do we backfill? And now we've got to change our philosophy on, what we were earmarking that time and money and allocation for towards something else. Let's see if we have the grant funding first, and then see if we have the capacity to do it. Just we have different views on which comes first, chicken or the egg. And I'd like to see if we have the grant funding, the grant source first, and then we can have that deeper discussion about if it's awarded, how do we put it into the matrix of projects that are happening, and does it fit? Which, to date, you're absolutely right, we don't have a new revised version or conversation about what the master plan looks like, what projects should go forward, what shouldn't. The three of us had a preliminary conversation about that related to major projects that should make sure they do not get dropped off the wayside when there is a transition with a new town planner and how that works. But it was not an in-depth conversation that we all have to have about the town as a whole. What are we standing behind? What are we not? You know, what types of things would meet the cut of initiatives that we want to do, all of that. So anyways.
Could I ask, is there a downside to sending in an application? Whether you get it or you don't? I mean, if it's little work to send in the application, if you get it, then you decide, you know, do we have the capacity to do it? Has it cost us much to try? If
I
you
think
don't
there's-
apply, you have no chance.
I think there's more to it than that, and
Okay.
if we all want to talk about it more at the end of the meeting, that's great.
Okay.
We're already over for this segment, so in
Okay.
terms of generally, we can come back to it and then
I would ask that we come back to it
make a
at the end.
decision at the end, you know, how far we go about that discussion tonight and what we put on a future discussion.
Jake, I'm not on capital, so I just asked the question.
No, the question's good. I just in terms of, you know, trying to keep to our time schedule.
Okay,
I
we are-
want to make sure that we,
We are over time perhaps, but I wanted to commend Mariah, not just for bringing into the town, I don't know, 20, 30 times, 40 times more than what we paid you. It's our money, you brought it back to us, and as valuable as the money is, you've demonstrated to me, and perhaps to anybody who understands how much money you brought in here, millions of dollars to us, the need and the function of having a town planner. There are some folks who sincerely believe, we're a tiny little place, what do we need to bother the planner for? We don't need that. Most places don't have that. Well, maybe they don't, but maybe they don't get millions and millions of dollars brought in for a few tens of thousands of being paid. So, thank you for that.
Thank you, Dan.
the other request was the open space and rec plan. Was there any questions on that?
Nope. It's due.
And there was one new one
Yeah,
That
and
came
then
in
the
this week.
hazard mitigation plan.
that was in your packets.
I sent that this week, or last week.
Okay, well, it's new and post deadline, so I assume we'll want to review it and get back.
Yep.
If we have questions, we'll let you know.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
You do not need to stay for the end of meeting discussion if you don't wish to. I'll be here. Okay, that's okay too. Thank you. Assessing in the Board of Assessors.
I'm going to excuse myself and just step away here.
Then we will not have a.
Did you catch that?
I'm sorry?
That's,
That's
Correct.
did you catch he recused himself?
Dan Hammock recused himself.
Hang on. Dan
you.
recused, we no longer have a FinCom quorum, so they are not a quorum any longer. And we can only have one member at the table because unless it's posted as a joint meeting by someone, the board did not post a joint meeting with the Board of Assessors. So only one assessor can be at the table. I don't, no preference. No preference which one, I don't believe it was, I don't believe the assessors posted it, we did not either. Thank you. That is correct, right? It wasn't posted
No,
by the
no,
assessors?
no.
Okay, I just want to
This
make
is
sure.
An oversight on our part. We'll know next time.
Understood. Okay.
The highlights and challenges of this year were, well, the biggest one was our appellate tax board case with the Northfield Mountain Hydroelectric Facility. We heard that in late September, and the expected decision is in May or June of '24, hopefully. I'm thinking the outside will get a decision is July, but I'm hoping before then. Additionally, related to the mountain project was the '24 appraisal resulted in a loss of $145 million overall in value. And it was a direct reduction in value of $115 million for the town of Erving. Our highlights included a successful collaborative work with the tax collector regarding the issuance of preliminary tax bills for fiscal year '24, as well as work done for the Proposition 2.5 override informational in town meetings. Additionally, we are scheduled to move our CAMA software to the cloud it's actually happened. I'm on it, there's a few little particularities, but I'm working on it, so. But now all the software for the town is on the cloud, so. The goals and initiatives, and perhaps the board would like to speak on this, but the board has discussed and voted on a creation of an assessor's clerk position. This position would be up to 10 hours a week to allow for coverage of the office when the principal assessor is out of the office. The assessor's office is the only office with a single position. Our concern is that the position of the principal assessor be vacated suddenly. We'll think positive, like I won the lottery. The assessors would not be able to continue the work in the assessor's office without someone with the knowledge of assessing. The Board of Assessors are an elected board and could not fill in on a regular basis to complete the work. Additionally, this position is the first step towards succession planning, as the principal assessor is 24 months away from retirement. I said 36 in there, but I'm really leaning towards 24. For our revenue, we don't collect fees. We only tax you, that's it. Significant budget changes are, basically, it's just the CAMA software addition, and the assessor's clerk position, and otherwise it's level funded. We do have a request for an additional $10,000 above last year's request for the legal warrant article. The current balance is $49,000, which isn't enough to cover what was spent at the ATB case. I doubt it. And then we have, for a special article, we have our appraisal services as well. Any questions?
What is the absolute drop dead date for you to get another person in your office?
Well, this is the thing, I could continue doing what I do now, all right? I mean, I've been doing this 25 years, I'm very efficient with my time. It's not really, the point is that if I did come in tomorrow, the town would really be in a bind, because the assessor's office is where it starts. That's where the valuation comes from, that's where, if you don't have that done, and you don't have someone in there maintaining that, then we can't move forward with setting the tax rate. And there is a shortage of people that do it, consulting agencies, right? There's like 3 out there that do it, and they're all struggling for staff, right? And so I don't even know if something were to happen, if you could call one of them and say, hey, come in and do that, if that would even happen. So that's really the dilemma. What would happen? There's just no backup. And it's not really a good business model, because you need the information from the assessor's office to set the tax rate.
So what happens if we aren't able to fund this position for this fiscal year?
I keep doing what I'm doing, and you hope I don't win the lottery. I mean, there's the other morbid side of it, okay, which nobody wants to happen, but it did happen to Warwick about a year or so ago. So I'm just saying, that's really, and they were in a bind because nobody knew what to do. I mean, could you fund it mid-year? Sure. If you want to cut it in half and fund it mid-year, that's fine. I just think that moving forward, it really should be a model for the office to have someone in there that can step in and do a lot of the work, not the high-level work, but the abatements, the exemptions, the clerical stuff, so that if something were to happen, that person could step in and learn. And then, maybe that person is a good fit and they take over when I retire.
Are you proposing like 2 5-hour shifts or something like that, or?
I was, how many days a year?
I'm there 3 days.
So
I
breaking
work
it up over the 3 days
over
to
the 3
shadow.
days. I was really thinking it's not much of a position, so whoever was interested to work with that person on the hours, as long as they were in the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday time frame. Maybe they want 5 hours a day, maybe they only want to come in 1 day a week. Just something, I would want a minimum of a 4-hour shift though, because you don't get any work done if you're only in there for 2. You know, it's like get set up and then you get up, it just isn't worth it. A 4-hour stretch is what I was thinking.
Do you have any anticipation of when the value may shift back? The valuation, because obviously I believe it's, interest rate driven.
It's partially interest rate driven, and it's mentioned that it was with inflation. Basically, it's if the expenses are up, they're not going to make as much. This is the first time in quite a while that it drops so significantly. I mean, since I've ever been on, and I was on back in the 90s, and nothing like this. It was a surprise, but then when it was explained out with the interest rates and inflation being at 9, 10, 11%, it started to make sense. I don't know. I mean, we can't.
Well,
you think you would guess it next year?
Well, I don't expect the value to go up next year. They were down at least 3 months. They had dredging. The reservoir was empty. They replaced the major equipment. The income flow will not be there. I can't make a guess because I'm not the professional. That's why we hire professionals. But what I can read to you is something that Federal Appraisal sent to us regarding why the value was dropped so significantly, if you'd like.
Well, we're eating into your planning board time, so I guess I asked the group and ask you.
Okay, well,
You're
sorry.
okay with it, and the
I will
group
be
would
very
like to
quick
hear
on my
it? That's
planning
up
board
to you.
time. I think this is
Do
important.
you guys want to hear it?
Yep.
Okay. The Northfield Pump Storage Hydro is an income-producing asset and is best valued using an income approach in which the income stream is analyzed and capitalized to convert the income to value. The capitalization process is done by determining a capitalization rate that is used to convert a single income stream into the value. The capitalization rate is considered a rate of return on an investment, and therefore portions of this rate are measuring risk and return requirements. The capitalization rate is partially determined by interest rates on debts, loans in the market. There has been an overall rise in debt interest, which includes overall mortgage rates, T-bills, AAA bonds, triple-V bonds, etc. And this raises the capitalization rate. Higher rates mean lower value. They do go on to warn us that additionally, since our last work on this plant, there has been inflation and market forces increasing both gross income and expenses. However, the amount of increase from the income is more than an offset of the increase in expenses in recent months, making the net operating income, the total revenue of cash flow to be capitalized, less than the years prior. Therefore, a lower income is capitalized by a higher capitalization rate, resulting in an even lower value.
So there's a lot there, but it is more than just its interest rates. It's return on investment. It's the best example I can give. I drive down Federal Street in Greenfield, and there are buildings, and you have a McDonald's, and then you could have the same size building right next to it, and that McDonald's is going to be valued at significantly more because the income it produces, it will be valued by its income approach, whereas the store next to it could be a mom and pop, and that is just going to be based on the real estate. And so it depends on what they're making. So if that helps at all.
Probably as clear as mud, but that's why we hire very well qualified professionals to assess it.
Appreciate that. I wasn't hoping you had I'm hoping, but that you had a crystal ball and could forecast it.
Or if we had
More
a feeling,
of
at
just,
least. Yeah. I think you were looking for, did we have a feeling, a sense of where it was going?
yeah, or more just if people see the economy swing the other way and all those factors that go into that, do we then generally expect that will show a shift, hopefully, in their valuation and their income accordingly?
It is an income-driven business, so we would use the income approach. So yes, if the economy improves, then you can say that the value will rise. The problem is that we're looking behind. So the assessment coming up for '25 is January 1st of '24. Interest rates are not doing great, you know. So, you know, we're always going to be behind a little. And then, like I said previously, I know that they were offline for a while. So we'll do, you know, it's significant money to have this facility appraised. But they are our largest taxpayer, and they are way above what I know how to do. So it's money well spent. And that is part of the increases for our special arts.
Yeah, and that's, the board decided, I don't know, 2-3 years ago that it made sense to do that on a yearly basis, to be more accurate, and usually it did go up, not this year, but it made sense to do that. And their personal property will still stay significant. I mean, that's about half of their valuation overall. And so that's not affected. And if they put more new things in there, significantly expensive things, that will help.
Other questions? Thank you.
I don't see it bouncing back anytime soon, and I guess to say is the more expensive things they put in there will also be factored on how much they actually spend on putting those and how they amortize them over years. And
Yes. But again, that's why we hire the professionals, and they will do their job. And we will be asking for, they're working on it now, so. And I do expect housing prices to rise, just this morning, everybody, ahead of time. The sales are still very strong in Erving, way over what I had them assessed for '24. So I don't expect the values to go down.
And everywhere.
We'll hope the other value doesn't go down again, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to stay here because I think I'm lined up in
You're next
planning's
for a
next.
few. I tried to line them up so they make sense.
All right, let me,
Dan rejoined at 8:22 and have a quorum on FinCom again.
all right, I put my planning board hat on. The challenges were, we revamped our zoning bylaws. They were approved with some minor changes. We actually have a fifth member on the planning board. Joe Newton is our fifth member, and he signed to run in May, so I'm like, yay. We have done some special permits and some other things. We are focusing on reviewing our subdivision control rules and regulations. They were last updated in 2001. It's time. We'll be working with attorney Mark Bobowski, and he is who we worked with our zoning bylaw revamp. We are also exploring some new possibilities, revisions to our solar battery and sign bylaws, but solar will wait until they probably figure it out up in the upper courts, because there are some significant challenges to the recent decisions on local towns. We recently updated our fees for special permits. This is, planning board, this is the only way we have revenue. $500 for all applicants. This is to cover the cost of legal advertising and legal notification to the abutters for the special permit property. If it doesn't cover it, we will address it at a future meeting. It's a fee that we set internally at a meeting. There was none for, I level funded otherwise. So I think I used 3 minutes of my allocated time.
You're trying to get us back on schedule.
Yep. Do you guys have any questions?
Comments?
I just have one question. You said if $500 does not cover the cost, then you deal with that later in the process. Let's just say the cost is only 200. People get their 300 back?
No, you have to.
Why not?
Well, you have to set a fee, because part of the process for a special permit is you have to go to the town clerk and you have to sign everything in, and the fee is part of the process. Now, that starts the clock ticking, right? We have a certain number of days to get that special permit advertised and the hearing held. I'll be honest, most of the time it's right around the $500. I think to advertise in a legal ad is $125 or more, and you have to do it twice. So we've, never mind the rest of the spending, so.
All right, I simply asked.
No.
So that, I think getting $100 extra in that entire town budget, if somebody wants to build a garage, is being kind of cheap.
Well,
But maybe there's no mechanism for returning money if it's less than what their fee is. Is there such a mechanism?
Just to clarify, the fee was $300 for residential and $500 for business.
I understand.
But we decided at a meeting that it would just be easier to be one straight fee. 500 is still actually, although it's a lot of money, a little on the less expensive side. In other communities, they charge more. So we really are just barely covering the expenses.
And it's only a special permit. If you can do it, then you're not paying that.
Right, it's only a special permit, so that's the only time that it comes into play. And it has to be certified mail, as Betsy reminded me, and that's up to $7? It's almost $8. Yeah, it's $8. So that's where it's within 300 feet of the property that you're doing a special permit. That's any boundary line touching, yeah.
I'm very familiar with that.
Yeah.
Totally, okay, My question is there any mechanism for, and is there any desire for, if the actual cost to an individual Erving resident applying for something does not reach the amount that they paid, is there a mechanism for, or any appetite for, sending back their few dollars? I mean, their $100 to them probably means a whole lot more than it does to the $12 million town budget.
I don't know of any mechanism to give back to the applicant. So the money that goes to the general fund, so it goes right into the general fund, and then the expenses, so unlike the Conservation Commission, all right, where the Conservation Commission can charge the applicant, they have to pay for the fee. Planning, there's no law under the Mass General Law that allows planning to do that. So when a special permit comes out, we pay the bill for the legal advertising, for the certified mail, that sort of thing. That all gets paid out of the planning board budget. And then that fee goes right to the general budget. There's no mechanism to take money out of the general budget, not that I'm aware of. If there is, I don't know of any other planning board that does that.
Okay, and it may not exist.
Just because we're running over, and this is in the weeds a little, what I would say is we can take that down and look at it offline about
Sure.
what options may exist, and then bring it back as a response in a future
Yeah,
meeting.
just like
Does that work?
Keep as much money in taxpayers' pocket as we can.
Absolutely.
I'm fine with that. Discussing it
Okay.
later is great. If there's
I've
no
added it to the
mechanism,
list.
that's great.
And that's fine. We do very few special permits, so, yeah.
Anything else for planning board?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. On to information systems, and I will recuse myself at 8:28.
All right, so our highlight and challenges are we continue to work on finishing the MFA, that's the multi-factor authentication, and the EDR, which is endpoint detection response through all the departments. We are 90% complete on this project. We are continuing our work with the police on the CJIS, Criminal Justice Information System, and completed the townwide network. We are transitioning the fire department, station number 2, police department, and public works building from broadband to fiber, and we renewed our agreements for fiber with the town hall, the library, and the senior center buildings. This has resulted in a cost savings. Our goals are to strive for completion of the MFA and the EDR, as well as integration of the CJIS at the police station. We are working on and hoping to complete the access control system for the police station and update the security cameras in the town buildings. We don't collect any money, so. The significant changes, the largest increase in our budget was the software costs. Now that we've moved forward to being completely on the cloud-based platform, our software license numbers and costs have increased. Also included are the licenses for our Aruba network, Adobe, LastPass, which are up for another 3 to 5 year renewal period, and this just happens to be the year that they're up. Any questions?
This department also has a capital request.
Oh, yes, I do. Should I have talked about that now?
This department has a capital request, I was saying.
We do have a capital request. It is for $35,000, and it's to replace 13 computers, desktops, and laptops that are at the end or beyond recommended service life and will need to be replaced. There was an email sent to you, which I know I printed a copy of. You had asked us what ones were being replaced. We were very lucky that we had Jake on board when COVID hit, because we were one of the few towns that were able to make a very quick transition to laptops and working from home. And we were able to be very efficient with that. So we repurposed a lot of machines, and now they're nearing the end of their useful life. Did you all get the email over at Capitol? Okay. Do you have any further questions on that, or not at this time?
Probably not at this time.
Okay. Sorry, I love seeing you guys. Any other questions otherwise?
I have none. No, at this time, no.
I'll rejoin at
Thank you.
8:31.
See, I think I'm
Thank
right on
you.
time.
Don't run yet, because I just thought of a question.
Shucks.
I'll
I'm
go
sorry.
back to sitting accused. You're good, go ahead.
On the laptop replacement list?
Yes.
You note for, looks like 5 laptops, you have question of a grant. Could you just, what department is
Those are
that?
the senior center?
Okay.
Senior center laptops.
Okay, and there may be a grant opportunity for those? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Rejoin at 8:32. Thank you. On to select board, administration of select board. I will read some of it, but I don't take, most of the credit goes to Brian, so I will also let him highlight a few of it. It's a long list of things, and they're all very valid, so if you want to highlight any specific ones in terms of highlights that you want to talk to or not, it's up to you.
Sure.
You don't have to.
Yeah, that's fine.
But if there's any questions anyone has about them as well, because there is a long list of, and that's a short list of what's happened, but,
Correct.
and then we can talk about the financial piece as well.
So just touching upon the highlights, obviously, this was the year that we said thank you and goodbye to Selectman Bembury after many years of serving, and obviously welcoming Selectman Loyne. A lot of the office work in the last several months has been working with the financial team on the financial software transition that began back in the spring, and it's carried on to today, and it will likely continue for the next few months as we finish implementing all those features that Deb was talking about, and doing the final transition and the training with the other department heads. So we have more work to go. While we were doing that work, several other initiatives had to happen at the same time. So we finished our FY23 audits, and we should have the reports back very soon to share with all of you and to post publicly. We worked through the select board on the extension of the NEPBA local 121 contract. That's our police unit. We also had a very first bargaining agreement with the wastewater department staff and ASME, and we've completed both of those. So that work's done. We've been trying to get as many personnel policies updated and revised, and the select board's been working on that work. We've also been working through our safety committee and working with department heads and facility managers on all of the training required for OSHA and some policy work that need to be put into place. So we've increased training opportunities, and in fact, the insurance company at their Boston meeting 2 weeks ago recognized the town for all that work. So thank you to the members of the safety committee team for that work. We've been working on many infrastructure projects, finished some culvert work out on Wheelock Street. We're working diligently with MassDOT to try to push the Church Street Bridge construction project forward. And we have the Bridge Street project and Maple Avenue project out to bid right now. So a lot of those projects are in different statuses of completion. That's probably enough on the highlights.
And just also Swamp Road got a small bridge grant. And so we're waiting
Exactly.
on
Yep.
advisement on engineering firm that will be assigned.
Right.
And have worked with Weston and Sampson to discontinue the agreement because they're not on the list of firms. So not a lot of work right at the moment, but that's coming.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Big one to highlight too. Thank you for ad hoc, because I know we didn't talk about it ahead of time and going through that list.
Yes.
Anything on the list, questions related to that?
Two areas that we're hoping to work on, in addition to working with departments on their goals. Our office does a lot of sort of strategic support for other departments. But I think two things that have come out of the past year. One, we have several vacancies on several boards and commissions in some elected offices, and we've been working to fill those. Very fortunately, in the last few weeks, we've been very successful in getting a few more town residents to serve on boards and commissions, and we're going to keep working to try to fill those boards and commissions. I think over the last year, there's been quite a concern and interest in the town's finances. And so I think we need to have some more community conversations about the state of the town's finances and address the concerns that exist in the community. So I'd like to spend some more time in FY25 working with residents and community members who have that interest to better understand the financial position of the town, because even though it's been stressful for the last year, it's still a quite strong position. I did articulate the fees that the select board does collect. Most of them are tied to your licensing capacity, but we don't license many establishments. So while they're there, the numbers of which licenses you issue are not probably enough to really generate significant revenue. And most everything other than wages has been level funded in your budget request, with the exception of legal expenses. And I did change the presentation of it slightly so it's subtotaled by functional area, which it didn't do in the past. So hopefully that's a little easier to follow and read in terms of presentation.
You mentioned legal services, but that's not an increase. We're just moving it between accounts, right?
No, it's an increase of 20,000, correct?
It's supposed to be, but I don't see it there.
Oh, no, I don't see it there either. You have 40
Did we
and
miss
20.
it?
I will double check that. Let me revisit that number real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
we'll
agree
dig into
with
that, because I was expecting an increase, but that doesn't actually
No.
represent what we all think is supposed to be in there
Correct.
of an increase. And then the one capital or similar item is the around town advertising services that we fund or purchase every year at $8,000.
That's correct.
Other than the legal fees piece or the legal services piece, any questions? The overall budget?
No.
Okay. I think next I had community TV.
Yeah, on the legal services, we'll bring that answer back at a future
Put it
point.
on my list.
We won't have it yet. We don't have it right this minute.
So you're saying
At first, you said it like you were going to look it up right now, but I didn't think you were.
you suspect that line was underfunded by 20,000?
I'm gonna go back and look at that. That's
Okay.
my belief. I will
Okay.
double check that.
Yeah, the belief is that total
Should be
subtotal
80.
should be 80, not 60.
Okay.
Instead
So
of,
we moved it between accounts to separate the two, but then also needed 20 more.
Okay.
So instead of increasing it by 20, it just input 20.
yeah.
I think we missed something.
That's
Yeah.
Let me double check that.
I just know we had a lot in prior years, as you can see, and we found that is not flowing as much as we'd like, so it may not be sufficient.
I agree.
We're past halfway, and this is only through 11/7. We'd already expended more than half of it for this fiscal year. So and we weren't even 6 months in fully. So Okay. Nothing else on admin select board, then yes, community TV, liabilities, VA.
Okay. In terms of community TV, I know I need to finish with the narrative for this department, or this function. The service that BNCTV has been providing to us for the last 3 years now, I think has become quite routine for at least the select board and the school committee. I know that Otis and the team have been kind enough to be extremely flexible with their schedule as we add special time meetings and special events with some regularity. So thank you to that team for making that possible. There's been some interest as this continues to develop in maybe doing additional presentations. We have a beautiful presentation space in the library, and the existing budget and the contract that we have with BNCTV really doesn't have the capacity to do that. So it's been kind of BNCTV to go beyond their scope of service to help us out, but that's not really what's in the contract. So I have proposed a $4,000 increase to give us some capacity to work with BNCTV to capture those things when it makes sense, when their schedule allows, but also to compensate for that additional work. We do have a slight increase on the insurance premium that goes along with the broadcaster's insurance for this. And then just to continue to keep investing in the cameras and the other equipment we need to keep doing this work, I'm recommending a $3,000 expenditure for the capital improvements. So the total increase is $4,800. I would also add we have a cable advisory commission with currently 0 members. So I'm actively recruiting cable advisory members to help serve on this committee and help steer this function, which I believe has become a resource for the community.
You said equipment, but that's a level fund?
Correct. That's a continuing appropriation, though. So it's adding to previous appropriations.
Okay, I follow what you're saying.
Yep.
You're recommending level funded as in the same deposit into that we did in prior years?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Which continues to grow it to offset the fact that we've spent more than we put in, which makes it look negative every year, but there's a balance behind that.
I want to say
We gotta find a way to carry those on here to visually understand there's a
Right.
standing balance.
Yeah,
Because it's a continuing, and so when we've added and subtracted, there's still money there. It's not negative, it's not zero.
That's correct.
That's what's missing, I think, and just visually, it doesn't look intuitive.
That's correct.
Is the Cable Advisory Committee, are they involved in negotiations with a 10-year contract with the
Absolutely.
cable company, and when does that come up?
We renew in 2028, and we typically begin 2.5 years in advance because you have to go through the involvement process with the community, and you begin those initial negotiations with the company, and it can take at least 1.5 to 2 years to do that work.
I thought so, but.
So we will be starting very soon.
In about a year or so.
Yeah.
Got plenty of things to do, but, or I don't know how, if we got more people waiting, but I just wanted to mention from a historical perspective, just my opinion, whatever that's worth. As much as I'm pleased with the planner bringing in millions of dollars, I'm pleased that we have an administrator and assistants here who keep things functioning on a very even keel. It's a very organized presentation of stuff that people can understand.
Thank you.
But again, in my opinion, we're between the proverbial rock and a hard place, where Prop 2.5 is a good thing in one respect. People don't run wild and towns just spend all kinds of money and people can have no say about it. On the other hand, everybody understands for their own electric bill, their own gas bill, buy a gallon of milk per pound of butter, trying to keep everything at 2.5%, that's only part of the pie. Your revenue figures in too, but trying to keep it there when inflation, we're told, is 3%, but it's closer to 10 for anything you buy, is a very that rock and a hard place thing. So we're trying to do things in an organized fashion, as easy as we can for people to understand who don't deal with this every day. And I applaud you for the organization of it all. And your board also, you put in a lot of time. I sat there for a long time. It doesn't happen in this meeting for a couple hours. It's all constantly, all the time, people needing stuff. So thank you for doing what you do and what you do also.
Thank you, sir.
When it comes down to it though, people just have to decide, is it cheaper to have it on the tax rate if it's something you want and we have somebody helping us pay the taxes, or is it 100% out of your own pocket? So,
Right.
whatever those words are worth to anybody, they're well-intentioned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That
And I would
actually triggered
just-
something for me.
Before you do.
Yep.
I would just add to that those projects and grants and opportunities that the planner has helped bring in and make happen also have been supported by the same team in Brian and Betsy and all the department heads and departments that support whatever that project is. It's truly a team effort, and we wouldn't have them without that catalyst to bring them in. But then the earlier conversation, all the support to make it happen too.
Yeah, it's certainly, this will only take 30 seconds or less, okay, as much as I talk. It takes a combined effort, cooperative effort, which I'll do the best I can to work on with school committee and cooperation and things where sometimes they kind of go off the rails. But if you picture an old-fashioned wagon wheel for people traveling west, just take one wagon wheel off, lay it on the ground. And you got the hub in the middle, and every spoke is important. You miss 2 or 3 spokes, and the whole thing falls apart. And that's the kind of management style we have here. We don't have, I'm up here telling all you peons what you can or can't do. We're all working on it together, and we're all important in our function. So it's all mutually appreciated, I hope.
Agreed. I just wanted to call attention to, after the Prop 2.5 conversation you just mentioned, that this funding source is coming from a different fund than the general fund. Everything else that we've discussed tonight has been largely the general fund, but this fund is coming from the revenue that comes in from that franchise agreement.
Cable.
It goes into a very specific fund, an enterprise fund, for the specific sole purpose of the PEG access channel. So that these fees are going in as the revenue, and then this budget is appropriating out of that fund.
See it on my bill every month.
Exactly.
We're paying it in different places. I was going to ask you that, but the operating is out of the PEG access account, right?
That's correct.
That is out of that fund, okay. To the services in general and expanding them, I mean, obviously, I'm a proponent. I think if people are paying attention and interested and it's value added, that's why we did it. Public hearings of any sort, I think is something that we should put on the list to discuss as a given. I feel like if we're gonna be on the school committee and the select board meetings and these, if there's a next that I think is really important to put there. I know we want turnout, so maybe they're delayed, but to when they go out for broadcast, we can at least record and broadcast later. I think that would be a good one to put on the list.
Okay.
In addition to other groups and other things that may be of interest.
It would also be good, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but some communities have been able to develop a volunteer base to help just capture the footage and edit at a later date. So it's not a live stream, like today's meeting is a live stream. Most of the meetings that we do have been. But there's another option where some things can be captured, recorded, and edited later for broadcasting. And that may be a great way to work with a team of volunteers who are interested in this type of work, and to capture those speakers, those presenters, those whatever that are happening in the community, and they could just be viewed later on. They could be added to both the cable channel and to the YouTube channel. So another option that wouldn't necessarily tie up staff time from a professional organization right at that moment. So something for us to explore.
Maybe those 0 members could look at that if we can get more than 0.
The right people are out there.
I'm sure they are, and if we can get them on there to maybe take
So
that
let's get them in here.
as a lead, that would be great, but we can also put it on the list as something to look at
Absolutely.
if there's interest. Questions, comments, concerns?
How many people would constitute a full committee there?
That one I believe is 5 members. Let me just double check that.
While he's looking that up, the next one will be liability insurance after that.
So I sent you all an updated budget request because I had the good fortune of meeting with our insurance executives last week.
Such optimism.
So the long and the short of it is the budget I sent you back in December, I do believe will hold true. I did budget for an increase I knew that there would be an increase coming, so things that typically drive the insurance premiums to change obviously would be a rate change coming from the insurer. Our claim history is also something that gets factored in, and if you add anything, so if you add a vehicle, like we added the van this year, we added the cruiser a year ago, so things like that will change that premium structure. So we knew that those things were things on the horizon. What just changed this week, which was something we were unaware of, back in 2019, just for context, the Municipal Insurance Agency was starting to realize that some of the valuations for big properties throughout the state had sort of fallen behind where they should have been. So they started this program to go out and reassess the values of all of those large properties. And they started that year for us with the school. They wanted to make sure that they had an accurate valuation. And so once they came back, adjusted that valuation, it resulted in a premium adjustment. So we weren't too far off, but there was an adjustment. Then COVID happened. They stopped sending people out for a period of time. Now there's that backlog, that mission that they had of hitting every community and working through all the properties, they're now catching up on. So they've done 4 more of our properties. And they came to me last week and said it's going to be a significant change for Town Hall, Police Station, Fire Station 2, and the most significant of all is Treatment Plant number 1. The resulting premium change for FY25 is $25,000. So that does have to happen. About 5 of that is Town Hall, Fire, and Police. That would go to the property liability budget that you all have. So again, I budgeted for an increase there. I think you're fine. The other 19 to 20 is attributed to the treatment plant because the valuation was so drastically off. And we needed to make that correction. So I do need to go back. I know you heard the Public Works budget at your last joint meeting, but I do need to go back and amend the Public Works budget for wastewater to reflect that $20,000 increase on the property and liability insurance.
Does that affect water as well, or no? Is it only the station?
Water does get billed out to their portion, but it's small, and so far there's been no change in valuation, so I believe the water portion for insurance is going to hold true for now.
And you think the 14.5 that we carried in here will cover the additional 5?
Correct.
Okay.
There, just so you're all aware, if the numbers look a little off, what you see in there is your expended to date for FY24 shows a higher amount than what we did in FY23, right? That's because there's an initial payment we must do in July where the bill has to be paid. And then around December, we get a breakdown of what belongs to what departments. The enterprise funds have to be charged their portions. And so I then work with the town accountant to apportion their responsibilities back to the enterprise funds. So I just received that actually last week. So I'll be able to work with Debbie to make the journal entries to put what belongs to wastewater in their budget and water what belongs in their budget. So when I do that, the expended to date in the liability and property insurance line will decrease accordingly, and it will be apportioned out to the correct enterprise funds. So there is capacity there.
I know I'm going to get this one wrong. Water will not increase even with the new mixer coming on. That's water, right? Yeah.
Right.
So that won't, even having that new equipment coming online will.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. It's something that maybe in future years may become part of their mix, but it takes some time for some of that stuff to come through. And that type of equipment gets valued differently than, say, a vehicle.
Okay.
Could
Go ahead.
I just want to say in response to this $25,000 increase in insurance.
Right.
It's a real good example of things I was talking about. We have no control over this. Tax rate's not going up because we went out and bought 3 extra backhoes. I mean, things that we must do just come our way. We have no choice.
Right.
Or I believe we have no choice, and people can vote no whenever they want to, but you have to insure your buildings and your vehicles and stuff.
Right.
And when the prices go up more than that 2.5%, I hope people are understanding that we don't want to take money out of your pocket, but the things we have to pay for. And just one final comment from me. I mentioned the school committee, and I didn't mean to intend they're doing anything wrong. What my intention is that we're all working together. We're in this together. We're not in this against each other.
Agreed.
And whether it's school committee or the teachers or administrators, whoever it is, the more we can work together, the better off we all are. And I think we all agree. If we don't agree, tell me why not. So, thank you.
One town, one bucket of money, one set of taxpayers. We're
Yeah.
all in that together.
The cable advisory is
So-
3-member. Stand corrected.
While we're updating past things, the Concom trust fund is $9,400 roughly, $9,400. I remember some stuff about POTW3. Was that DEP stuff, not insurance value stuff? Am I mixing two things? No, I don't need what they were, but it's not an insurance thing, right? Or it is?
I had a insurance question on POTW number 3. That's the Farley plant. They have to date declined to revalue it in terms of prioritization because they have limited resources. So they're going in sort of bands of what they anticipate are the highest concern areas. It
Okay.
is on the list I've asked for them to look at. I did adjust the value slightly just based on what we have for square footage, but it's on a list for a future inspection and valuation.
To your point, Dan, I think we can be underinsured potentially, but that's not a, I asked that question, Brian probably was like, oh God, the other day when he told me about the increase, and that's not really a viable option. Obviously, if we can't do that, that would be fiscally irresponsible, so. And I assume if their valuation of something is not correct by no fault of ours, they're still bound to cover the liability. So right now, we're not at risk there. Just, we may have a premium change when they do get to evaluating it.
Correct.
Okay. Other liability insurance type, okay. ZBA? Pretty-
ZBA typically has a level-funded budget.
I recuse myself again for this.
Oh, I was gonna say we have a strong quorum, but we do have one individual to speak to any questions if there are any.
Let's look to the right page.
It's
Yeah,
level
it's the
funded at
550 again.
550 for advertising.
I think typically it's the Association of Planning and Zoning Boards dues is about all there is that we've
And
ever paid sometimes.
Occasionally you get a variance hearing.
Yeah.
There's been 2 in my time here.
Seldom.
Is that a fee based? Is that paid for by the
That's fee-based, yeah.
applicant?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's it. It's not much of a generator, clearly.
No.
Did you have a question?
Oh, I was just gonna say, well, we're talking about boards that need members. Is the ZBA have a quorum? Do they have a full board
We
or?
finally have a quorum again. We have a newest member that was added 2 meetings ago.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I know the committee hasn't met yet to sort of go over their function, but we do have 1 vacancy. So we are absolutely taking letters of interest.
I think we should have a sign
Knew
behind
that
us
list coming.
with a list of vacancies.
Tim, it's
For
got
every
penciled in a
meeting.
name. He's
And
got
I just heard that Scott Bastrash was interested in that position.
No, not at all.
But yes, we do have an updated list, and I'd be happy to share that with whomever. It is in the Around Town, I believe, for the February edition. So
She'll be mailed out on Thursday.
There you go. Okay. Anything else on ZBA?
Big budget.
Big spenders. Updated revenues. So we had revenues, but I don't think we really talked about them last meeting, last budget review. We have the updated ones now. Rather than running through all the puts and takes and all the various governmental changes at the state level and what we may get, what we will get, et cetera. Any questions?
I enjoy the projections, but you never really know what you're gonna get till you get it. So,
And I hate giving people a number with like a note saying this could change, because it absolutely can change, and it changed even from when I gave it to you a month ago to what I gave you this weekend, and it will change again. But hopefully every time it changes, it's getting a little more refined, so there's less of a question mark and a little more certainty.
It's a nice placeholder, but I don't put a lot of weight in it until it's finalized.
Absolutely. Nobody should. The one thing that I think was helpful is we are clear on some of our assessments, so to know the FERCog assessment is solid, and we can actually see a savings in that FERCog assessment, so I will make that change. The solid waste district came right in on budget. That's not changing, so I have no changes there, and then unfortunately, I'll let you all know about the retirement and the property insurance changes, but as I get more of that information, whether it's on the revenue side or any changes in our projections for assessments, I'll make sure I let all of you know.
And that PEG access balance is right there at 104, almost 105,000 currently. I don't know what our annual revenues are, but we can look at that at some point as well and just make sure it's self-funded, continuing to self-fund, or if we're depleting it and at some point we'll run out.
You're talking about
PEG access versus community TV.
it's approximately $15,000 to $16,000 a year, so we're right now spending slightly above.
Okay.
It's all based on the
So
number of
we've got about 100
subscribers.
years.
I was gonna say, I mean, if we're spending, 2,000, you got approximately 50 years before we deplete it, if we stay at that same rate. I mean, obviously that is in flux, but.
Questions on the revenues? Okay. The assessor overlay last year, we only did 100, right?
That's
I
correct.
was just looking at that, it's up to 200 again. The year before, I think we did 300. Yeah,
I cut it last year.
yeah.
All right, anything else, other than circling back to projects, capacity, the grant application, the capital request?
Just a general meeting thing. I know Brian usually prepares memos with changes for every single meeting that we have. I'm wondering, because we often go back and refer to things, can we use this first memo that you sent tonight as kind of the base and just keep adding to that?
Sure.
And then just keep emailing when you send it out with the packet. That way, if we want to go back and reference something, it's not, oh, was that at this meeting or that meeting? It's just like a running document.
So we just keep this document and just move
And
older
just
stuff to
compound.
the
Yeah,
back and just
yep,
put the newer
let's-
stuff up top?
Yes, I think that would be fantastic.
absolutely do that.
Rotating
Just
it.
put a
yeah.
new
Yeah.
date on it and just put them items
And
there?
then this is just
Can I add to that, or is it the same thing?
no, different.
If something changed, like you put an update on insurance and then it updated again, can you just like cross out the header on the old one?
Yeah.
Just to kind of give us a visual of, oh, that's not the most recent, if there's more than one of
Got
the
it.
same.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can do that.
And because, as Jackie will attest to, I am not a tree killer. You gave us all budget books. I don't necessarily know if we need to have you reprint the budget every single week for a meeting for us as well. Because you
Happy
printed
to.
budget, I know FinCom all got printed budget books. I think the rest of us are digital.
Okay.
And so I
And that's a
just,
complete budget, correct? That's not just
No,
for
that
tonight?
no,
was
this is tonight's
That's just
packet.
tonight's.
So I just feel like we're all responsible. We can find our, and bring our
Okay.
budget books and.
Absolutely.
Don't kill any more trees.
And lower those office supply costs.
That's right.
Lower paper and toner costs, lower electricity costs.
I printed copies on the table as requested. Nobody looked at them.
But the first meeting, everybody wanted them.
And everybody wanted them, so they are ready.
That was because they saw what happened to the first meeting, they're like, I'm not gonna be those people.
Yeah.
Fair enough, fair enough.
And I will say, I'm just
That's
asking
okay.
for just the budget portion, like the memos and that kind of stuff,
Yep.
but just the actual budget, because you did the book, so.
Right, not a problem.
Okay. Anything else on that before we go back to? Okay, I don't know where to restart that conversation. I actually think you might have been speaking, Dan, when I said like, we're kind of at time, so we'll come back to it, but it was about, because you had said, if I'm recalling correctly, something to the extent of like, what is the harm or not in applying for the grant,
Oh, yeah,
right? I think that was kind of where we left off.
just is there a downside?
Right, yeah, exactly. I was just going to kind of comment that, well, there's probably a process to reallocate if we put ourselves in the pool, but we're not actually ready to execute when we do get the funding, someone else didn't. So at least as a greater community in the state and other towns around us who are also competing for a lot of these funds, if we're putting our name in and then we get it and then go, nah, we're not really ready. Thanks anyway. There's maybe a process to reallocate that fund, but then that other town or community may have a lot less time to make a decision to execute or not too, right? And so, just as a good steward, I think maybe, I hesitate to go after money that we aren't ready to work with. Just, that may be a little philosophical again. I would want everybody to get as much money as we can, but
Could that be detrimental too, though?
saying no,
Saying no, then come down in a couple of years
good
down the road,
question.
oh, they said, no, we're not gonna give it to them?
that's a good question. I didn't think about that one.
Yeah.
If I was on the judging committee, I might look at that and think that, I don't know if it's a criteria, but I think it's a fair concern.
I know we talk about capacity, and I do think it needs to be pointed out. We have a planner right now who is incredibly experienced with Erving. She's up to date on all the projects. I mean, we've got hopefully the IP mill, Bridge Street, there's sizable projects going on right now. For someone new coming in the door, is this another project that we want to put onto their plate when they are going to be coming in and learning the town, learning the ropes, getting caught up to speed, and kind of being, depending on how much time they may or may not have with Mariah before she leaves, they're kind of getting thrown into the deep end. And so I know we do discuss capacity, but is this truly a project that someone new coming in needs to be taking on at this time?
At your approval, could I ask Mariah to come back up?
Yes.
I just have some questions, and rather than yelling it to the back corner of the room.
Yeah, I would rather we don't do that, and we have it on the mic, on the camera, it'd be great. Thank you.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Welcome back. As soon as you were talking about that, it spurred on a question, that's why I wanted to call her up, related to the timing of this. So typically this grant is due annually. People apply around this time, which is
every February 1st.
Which is the middle of our budget season.
Always.
So it'll always be in the middle of our budget season. And at what point last year did you get the notification that we were not selected for that grant, which we did apply for?
I think they usually announce in May because they try to give you a June start. I'd have to go back and look exactly, but I know that they try to have it be June to June. So they award in June, and if you're doing a planning grant, like we would be doing, it would be a year. If you're doing construction, I believe they usually give you 2 years to complete
Right.
your work.
So the reason I asked that is to go to your point, we wouldn't have to make a decision on whether or not we're saddling the new planner with this, because we wouldn't even know until they've been in the job for, hopefully, a couple of months. I don't know when they're going to get hired, when that process is going to, flush out. We're going to be void a town planner on March 1st, but we're going to try and actively fill that as soon as we can, hopefully in April, May at the latest. So around the time that they're coming in, I'd like the town planner to, if we did get awarded the grant, if we were to apply for it and get it, to be able to be part of that process to say, how much capacity do I have? How much capacity does this department have? What would that look like? And they may make a recommendation at that time saying, I appreciate the application and the grant, but let's hold off for another year and apply next year. I just would hate to not take it if we could and do that.
Can I offer just one more contextual piece as to why this request is coming forward? This summer, residents, community leaders will be asked to be part of some conversations around the reconstruction of Route 2, Old State Road, the east side of Old State Road to Mountain Road. At the 25% hearing, we've had some informal conversations. Residents of Farley have attended those meetings, but the official 25% design hearing has not occurred yet. As MassDOT is preparing for that project in 27, so about 2.5, 3 years from now, they have to go through their own justification process about complete streets. Can you fit the multimodal transportation on Route 2? And there really is no way to make that work with the existing layout and the constraints that Route 2 has. This provides, potentially, it's only conceptual, but potentially provides an alternative route on the other side of the Millers River that the MassDOT project could turn to. MassDOT is aware that this is something that the town has started to explore with the town of Wendell. And so the potential to explore just this conceptual feasibility stage, which is all we're talking about at this point, if it is plausible at the end, may turn into that alternative for MassDOT to further explore and let the state hopefully take the lead on when you go to do that project in 3 years. So I just, for context, that's part of the reason why this was coming forward at the time that it was coming forward, because we're working on the construction plans sort of simultaneously as we're considering, is this a feasible option? So I just offer that.
I guess what I'd say is, going back to Deb's comment about we haven't really given direction on where we want to go, and we've been concerned about departments and bandwidth and everything else. If we were to move this grant application forward, we need to put our heads together and decide to reprioritize what might we push, what can wait perhaps another year. So, I mean, because quite honestly, Scott, if we can hire a great candidate that will come in here sometime in the spring, even if, they get up to speed, we've got a sizable pile to work with as it is, and you don't want the pipeline to run dry, but how much do we want to put in it without knowing the candidate and their ability?
And that is why I would like to have them be part of that conversation of whether or not they would like to utilize the grant if we get it. We can go circular on it. I just have a
Right.
differing
So,
viewpoint.
I guess-
I have a differing viewpoint. I don't think we should stymie the process of applying for the grant, because in the past, as soon as we've been awarded a grant, we've steamrolled that grant into fruition regardless of capacity. I think that methodology that we've done in the past has got us into the predicament we're in today. But I think applying for a grant, seeing if you have it, and then checking to see if you have the capacity to fulfill it is not problematic. I don't see the same issue that an awarding authority is going to say, Erving decided not to take the grant for the trail survey, so that's it. Put the black mark on there. Erving's never going to get one of our Mass Trails grants again. I don't foresee it that way. I'm willing to, do it. I'd like to make the motion if people, and we can still debate it, but I would like to move it forward and see where it goes from there. So we do a lot of these conversations where we do not see eye to eye, and that's fine. We could literally circular talk this the rest of the
Okay.
evening.
And I'm
we
not-
have other points that we need to get to, so I'd like to just sort of, if you're willing to entertain it, I'll make a motion. We can see if it goes forward. If it doesn't, one way or the other, we can move on to the next topic. Because there is a couple other.
This is the last topic, unless I missed something.
Was there something else? Oh, no, the rest was for future meetings.
I'm not opposed to moving it forward, but we would need to have that bigger discussion about, what's the vision, what's the plan to keep things
Yeah.
manageable and give some direction.
Yeah,
that
and at the
other
meeting.
boards are asking for.
At the meeting that I had with Mariah and Brian last week, part of that discussion was the ask of Mariah to sort of help tailor sort of all of the master plan that's out there. We all get the updates about where we're currently at and what quarters we expect those to go in, but then really look at what's feasible, like bandwidth-wise. We're overextended, so as these roll off, we're not filling a one-for-one. So as we complete this current project, that creates the capacity to actually complete the other projects that are on there, not creates capacity to add a new project. So it's sort of, we've already had those conversations about the long-range plan that you're talking about. It's nothing more than a brief conversation that we had last week. It hasn't come to fruition, not on my end. You may have started to work on it, I'm not sure. But yeah, to get to that point where we have to streamline some of the things. But that'll also come in conjunction with whoever the replacement is to have those conversations and what their capacity is and what their training is and their niche that they know and that they do, because they're all going to come in with different, experiences and trainings, and some might be heavy on economics, some might be heavy on zoning, some might be heavy on, grant funding. It'll all be different things. We'll have to see what those applications look like and who comes in, and then include them in a conversation about the master list and the projects going forward. So,
Can I,
No disrespect, but that sounds like the opposite. Like, close one out and don't backfill it with another right away to have capacity to continue on. Doesn't sound like go apply for another one now.
so
I just-
you're convoluting the, apply for the grant to give the capacity to evaluate it in May or June. I'm not saying that by approving the grant application, that I would even approve the acceptance of the grant should we be awarded it. I want to be very clear that I'm only an advocate of giving us the opportunity to get the grant and truly evaluate where we are in May or June if that becomes part of the process. I don't want people to think that I'm saying,
No, that's fair.
by applying, that I'm saying we have to do this project. I might advocate for applying for the grant, we might get the grant, we might hire a new town planner, and I could be a staunch advocate to say, nope, we don't have capacity for that. I'm glad we pushed through the grant and we got it, but we can't do it now. Things have changed. And I'd be okay with doing that. These are recorded, so you can play this back in May or June. It's quite all right. I'm okay with that. I'm just saying, so.
I just want to point out some procedural stuff here. This came in as part of the FY25 budget capital plan. The capital planning committee has not had the opportunity to thoroughly vet and review this project. So by bringing it forward this evening, you're circumventing that process, which frankly is disrespectful to the capital planning committee. We do a lot of work. We put a lot of time and effort into this. Last year, because of the way the budget situation played out, the funding for capital was removed from the budget. If this is approved this evening, that means something else will not be approved. Something else of a more needful priority will not be approved. Furthermore, and Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that in our bylaw it states that capital has to approve the project unless it is an emergency. I would not deem this as an emergency. If I am incorrect, please feel free to call me out.
I think it's, capital planning committee makes recommendations, they review
Sorry,
and recommend.
recommendations.
Correct.
To sit here as a member that puts in a lot of time, it's rather insulting that the capital planning committee would be completely circumvented and not given the time to do their due diligence on a project. It is unfortunate when this deadline falls that it is before the capital planning committee has had the opportunity to do that. But it also sets a precedent to department heads that this board doesn't actually matter, because their project can just be pushed and argued is the wrong word, but advocated for, to come before the Board of Selectmen, and that if the selectmen feel strongly about it, they'll just move forward without allowing capital to do their due diligence.
I'm going to respond to that. So again, I'm not advocating that we do the project. I'm advocating that you, as capital planning and finance committee and select board, have the opportunity to do exactly what you just said in May or June if we are awarded. I don't want this to be an approval of the project. I don't want to engage in any services without having an actual approval that we got a grant, and then that entire process that you just talked about comes in front of capital and says, okay, we got awarded a grant. Now we do the whole due diligence about what do we have for capacity? What do we have for in-kind services to be able to do that? Do we have the funding sources to do it? All of that comes out. So the entire process that you talked about that is supposedly disrespectful, that I'm trying to circumvent, I'm not trying to circumvent it. I'm trying to ensure that we can have that conversation in May or June once we figure out if we have an award. If we got denied last year, if we get denied again, this entire conversation is a moot point, and we move on and maybe we try again next year. It has nothing to do with approving the project. I just said that to Chairman Smith. I'm not asking to approve the project. Your recommendation on whether or not it fits into the plan is crucial, and that should come after we figure out if we even have the award. Why would I want you to figure out if we have the capacity for that program if we have no idea if we're going to even have the funding to do it? I would rather you know that you have the funding and then say, hey, we got an opportunity here. Let's put it into the mix. Let's put it at our next meeting. Let's see if it fits in so we can make a decision on whether or not we want to accept. So I want to very much clarify that I'm not trying to ask the Board of Select and my other compadres up here to push something through in circumventing the process that you just talked about.
Then why are we even seeing the request? Then why did that request even come before capital planning at this time?
I don't know, and it doesn't have to.
It's because it meets the guidelines of capital planning.
Not for a grant application, it doesn't.
Hang on, let's back up. It's a little chicken and the egg, but this idea that we want to go chase funding that we don't know if we can spend or have the capacity for is totally the opposite of the discussion we had 2 months ago when we set the budget narrative and budget message, or 3 months ago, where we said we want to also look at what are we, from all of those variables of ability, capacity, funding, what are the projects that are priority that we're going to try to make room for? Because we need to know that so then we can be looking for and attempting to get grant opportunities that support the projects that we said are the priorities, because we know we may not get them all in the first round. If we do it in reverse, which is my issue with it, we are potentially going to end up with 5 priority projects that we have a capacity to do 1 or 2 that are all funded now. And that's, for me, that's backward. And I think the piece about this is, from my capital planning standpoint, is there's a request to approve a capital project. The funding source is a grant. It's not the other way around, that you wait until the grant comes along and then you ask for the capital, because now it's out of cycle and it's not an emergency and it violates the policy. You can't even ask for it, because the policy says it must be reviewed and recommended by the capital planning committee in the cycle unless it's a time-sensitive emergency. And the award does not qualify in my book as time-sensitive emergency, because it's not an emergency project. And apologies, I think, Ben, you had something you were going to say.
My train went off the track.
All right, sorry.
No, I guess, Scott, I was just wondering, you wanted to take some kind of vote. What was the vote for?
I was just going to make a motion and see if there's a second and we can move forward. It's to authorize the application of the grant.
So if you voted for the authorization for the grant, we met as a capital planning committee and said we don't want it because we don't have money for it, what would happen?
Well, as Brian just said earlier, you would make a recommendation whether or not we move forward with it. So the difference of applying to see if there are funds, we've given authorization.
Pardon me if I may interrupt you.
Yeah.
The question was, we authorize the grant tonight, and then 3 weeks from now, capital planning reviews and does not recommend the project. What then? We don't have an answer yet on the grant. What then? Is that correct? I think that was the question.
I'm not sure why they would be taking it on until they figure out if we have the grant approved. That's my point, is I think we need to change the process a little bit. I'm okay with getting 4 grants in and then picking the 2 that we end up prioritizing to do. And the others, we don't have to accept them. So you see what I'm saying? I think
I understand what you're
we have a
saying.
different philosophy on how I think we should do it moving forward. And I've had enough time. I think we've spent an additional 25 minutes on it. I don't need to continue to try and validate my point of why I think we should apply for the grant now. Clearly, I'm not going to get anybody else to change theirs. If you'll entertain it, I still would like to make a motion.
I could be wrong. I thought you made the motion.
Not yet.
No disrespect. Okay. I think the bigger conversation of what the issues at hand here, and if we want to change the process, that's a process change, and that we should go through that for me before we actually change what we're doing. But you can make the motion. I have no problem with that. That's yours to make.
I'd like to hear from any of the other hands before I do, in case it's pertinent.
Mariah?
I was just going to say, I think that the timing of this grant is what is causing this conversation. It's just a weird time to apply for a grant, because I've submitted this last year, I moved this forward, then the whole thing at town meeting happened, and this got pulled. So I was kind of operating under the assumption that this went forward last year, so I should work on this grant. And now, again, falls in this weird kind of crack in the budget time where I'm operating off of kind of, there was support last year, but there hasn't been review this year. So I really apologize that, like, the timing of this is just really unfortunate. I think in terms of process for grants going forward, I think that is a really important conversation, because we also, even though this is the only grant that I've worked on that has an application at the beginning of February, we do have like an expression of interest process coming up for the One Stop program, which starts now basically and is due in April. And so it requires us to look forward at a time where we're not finished with the budget. So I don't know what your process looks like with that going forward, but it's something to think about in terms of applying for grants for projects that haven't been funded at town meeting yet, and all of that. So I think that's, I don't have advice, I'm just saying that that's an important thing, not just for this grant, but for other grants going forward.
I think it's, for me, it's the bigger picture piece of it.
Yeah.
That we don't have a good process, and yes, it happened last year, but that authorization and discussion hasn't happened yet, and now it's due.
Right.
And you know, learn from that in hindsight, right? That not only is our overall process on how we do this, how we approach it, need to be discussed and reviewed. Because clearly, I don't think we've been following the way it's laid out, always, unintentionally, and I also think as things have evolved, we need to reevaluate what is the right process. So I think we learned from it. I think you're right.
Yeah.
And this isn't the only one. It won't be the only one. So we need to refine that.
This grant in particular, though, the same thing will happen again next year. So I guess I just want to throw that out there. There isn't a way to solve this in terms of your process right now. That next year, you know, if I don't apply for this tonight, or I do, it doesn't really matter. If we don't get it, next year we're going to be in the same boat where it's going to fall in the middle of the budget season. Your next planner will be operating under the assumption of whether there was or was not support tonight. Hopefully you'll have a chance to review it beforehand, but it's still going to fall in this weird budget cycle issue.
So I hear you, and all I would say from my, just because we've had these perspectives on how this is supposed to be, if it's in as a capital project, if it's approved as a capital project, recommended, and potentially then funded, then it's a standing okay to go for the grant until we can get it and actually execute the project. So I would say if those steps had already happened, and we had the funding and it was approved as a capital project in the prior fiscal year, and we didn't get the grant, then that's an open expectation to continue applying for the grant year after year until we get it or we pull it off the project list. Because we have the funding, the match funding, and we've done those things, right, as the background to it.
I would not have operated under that assumption because you may have had a new project that fills in that space. We don't have to like go down the rabbit hole,
no.
but I guess in terms of handing a process off to the new planner and like training someone on how this works, I think that you're going to run into this situation again, and so I think we're all understanding that needs to be resolved.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want to add for the process, I think one of the pieces that you may all be overlooking is on your forms, you ask the submitting entity or the department head to provide you with potential revenue sources. And so this is part of that process of seeking revenue sources to give you all the options to consider, can you fund these projects? So whether that's Complete Streets or the One Stop program or this particular Mass Trails grant, our funders have a multitude of cycles and expressions of interest before the real application. I met with the FinCom chair and the select board liaison and the school committee last week to talk about their roof and their HVAC system. And there's a potential source that needs an expression of interest in the coming week. And it would need a full application by the month of April, if that was a viable source to go down. So I just offer that, not because you should race out and do any of those things, but if we are so rigid about making sure that there is some other funding that you can make available before we even explore whether or not we can get you additional funding, well then you're just potentially limiting yourself to self-funding all your projects, because we wouldn't have the opportunity to even explore whether or not we can get you some grant funding. I'm not advocating that you do one way or the other. I just want you to be aware that going in that cycle may limit your opportunity to access other funding sources, because we have to be able to work with our funders.
I think what I said was not what I meant, so I misspoke a little bit of, just that that the project's approved, that the funding, the whatever match funding might exist is already done, was not quite what I meant, because we may not know what that might be, because we haven't gotten a grant or applied for it yet. So
Yeah, right.
it was more about this is a project, it's on the timeline, here's where we want to start it, and we know it may delay if we're going to chase grant funds. That's
Okay.
more of what I meant to say, so just to clarify. But the other, I lost the other thought. That's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, before I make a motion, that in order for the full, so you asked a question about why did this come in front of capital now? It shouldn't have, because the request, as I heard it, was coming before the select board to find out if she was authorized to apply for a grant. That's it. It was not about putting a project forward. If the grant gets awarded, then the application to the funding, to the capital planning and finance committee and select board at that point saying, I filled out the whole thing, and here's all of the funding sources, here's the pieces, here's the mechanism, all of that, and that's what I'm asking for approval on. And that's the process. The awarding of whether or not, or the authorization of whether or not somebody applies for a grant, the three of us make that authority. We grant that authority. That's what the townspeople give to us at town meeting every year. So all I'm saying is, I wanted to see if we could apply so that the application can be as fully vetted as possible, whether or not we have the grant. My guess is if we get denied on the grant, you won't see another capital one until the next year when we have that conversation again about, should I apply for the grant again? So having said that, I'm going to make a motion.
So you said you wanted to hear a comment before you made your motion. There was
Sure.
another hand.
Oh, there was another hand? I'm sorry, I didn't see you back there. I apologize.
Jackie, sorry, I didn't know if you did.
No, I didn't.
You're all having a philosophical discussion about the process, which is fine. I was just wondering, Brian, you had mentioned that the Route 2 improvements that are happening there. Not that I wouldn't want to see the grant move forward, but I'm wondering if we wait a year, or we don't wait a year, I don't know about the grant, if we have MassDOT's support for this particular, if it's a stronger grant application, if they're on board with it. So which means delaying it, or do you already have that support? That's my question.
Yes.
So, because it solves a potential issue for them, it makes a stronger grant application for us if everybody's on board. So that was my question.
And just to clarify, this is just to do a feasibility study. The feasibility may come back and say this is not feasible.
Yeah. So
And that may put this to
it's a
bed.
really good question.
Right.
I had a meeting with MassDOT on Thursday to ask specifically if I had their support to move forward with this. And I do. They are working on the paperwork showing that. But they also generally understand that this is a feasibility study. Part of it would be in their layout. And so they would have to be a partner, just like DCR would have to be, to figure out, again, is it feasible? DCR, by approving this grant, would not be saying, yes, we are doing this on our land, and neither would MassDOT. It's looking at whether it's possible, and I totally agree. We have a lot of things on our plate in the coming year. I think that you're gonna have to hire someone new and look at capacity overall. Yeah.
I interrupted you, so go ahead.
Make a motion to authorize the town planner to submit a grant application in the amount of $37,713.12. I think I got that right from the last time. For the Blue Heron Greenway feasibility study to the Mass Trails Grant Program, and to authorize Mariah Kurtz to sign any and all documents required.
I will second it.
Further discussion, the other piece, to what you were saying, Brian, about grants. So we, as capital planning, and please tell me if I'm off on this, requested all funding sources and have been expanded that every year and what that looks like and what we want to understand. My understanding, and I'm curious if it's the same for the rest of the group, was what are the potential sources, not find out what we can get approved for before you ask. It's where could we potentially fund this from, which we don't know yet because we don't know if we're going to pursue the project, rather than we've already applied and we have funding. And I don't know what you all think, but that was my perspective, was always that it was there may be grants out there that we've identified that would line up, at least loosely, that we could go after, not that they exist, that they've already been approved.
In the past, that's what it's felt like it's been. The project would come in front of us, and we would say, oh, there's a grant, we apply for it. Not, there's a grant, do we have a project? Or, I mean, and this is also tied to us, unless I'm missing something. If we get the grant, how many projects can we use this for? Is this just the one?
The one you applied for.
The one, right? So this is, we're saying, we want the grant because we're doing this project. Not like we want, you know, the chapter 90 money for roads that you can use for any road. This is for, we want this for this project. So I think by saying that, we're saying we want this project.
My concern with chasing grants is then how does capital plan? So this is small potatoes, let's be real. The price of this grant is small potatoes. When you look at a project like Bridge Street, which was, I think, $500,000, how does capital plan for that? If grants are being gone first, if someone goes out and gets a grant, and I'm going to use recreation for an example, they have asked for a feasibility study for a park grant so that they could work on Betts Field. Based on what the park down at Erving Riverside Park cost us, they're probably looking at a park grant, I'm going to guess around $1 million, if not more. We would be, I think it's a 40% match, give or take. It's maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. If that grant is sought and received, how does capital then plan for the fact that the town has been awarded a, let's just call it a $500,000 grant, when it hasn't come before us, we haven't reviewed it, we haven't seen it? How do we now look at the fiscal year and go, oh yeah, yep, we can accept that. No, we can't. Where do we factor in, and how does the capital planning factor into that process, if that's how grants are now going to be sought? We have no way to plan.
And I think that's the challenge with what we're discussing versus the bylaw, which is we find out in May we got awarded for something, there's not the opportunity to go through the process required to say yes or no. We've already passed that cycle, we've already passed that planning phase, because it calls for planning in the year coming, not a week before, a month before. There's not enough time for all that. So I think it doesn't contemplate that as logical, and unless it's an emergency.
I mean, grants have always come before capital for capital to weigh in on first. In fact, one of the concerns previously brought was too many things were being sought and too many things were being approved, projects as a whole. And so that was part of how this whole conversation of having capacity, the capacity conversation began. If you suddenly say, well, we're not going to put grants in front of capital first, we're just going to go out and apply for them and see what happens, that kind of negates our opportunity to discuss with department heads capacity. It kind of negates our at least on the grant aspect, it negates capital as a whole. And I just don't see how that philosophy works with a capital planning committee. Yes, I completely get that there are time constraints and that maybe we need to work on a different plan for when there are grants if a deadline does fall in the middle of budget season, and how does that happen? How does that kind of get resolved? But this just feels like capital is just it just feels like a completely backward process, and I don't see how capital plans their projects for a year with this philosophy.
Maybe that's clear to what I was saying. Getting it in May is not allowing for a planning process. It's quick and immediate. Go ahead.
Mariah, last year when you applied for the grant, you brought it forward we gave consent that we were behind the project and it should move forward?
I believe so, yeah.
Right. And so by your own admission, if we approved it before in a previous fiscal year and we were behind it then and we were behind applying for the grant and we got denied, then it's implied that we are continually behind that grant and we keep applying for it until we get it. That's what you said earlier tonight. And she countered back saying, yeah, but what if there's other projects? But you had said if there was a previous fiscal year where we had approved a project and wanted to move it forward and had to apply for a grant, we would continue to apply for that grant until we got approved. This is exactly what's happening. She applied for the grant last year. We're behind this project. She came to me and said, should I apply for the grant again? I said, well, bring it to the board so we can just make sure. But yeah, we wanted to do it last year. Let's apply for it and see if we get it again this year. It's following the exact same logic that you just said about 5 minutes ago. It's a previous approval that we were all behind and wanted the project to move forward. And so let's see if we get the grant. We can then go through the exact same process. A typical planning grant like this is, like you said, about a year. So we could absolutely look at convening a meeting, giving it to the capital planning in February of next year to try, in the beginning of the budget cycle, and to try and get it done before June when the year would run out. So all of that stuff could still happen. That process can still happen. None of that is asking to be circumvented. It's just, this is a step of saying, we wanted it before, we asked her to apply for the grant last year. According to your own statement a few minutes ago, she should have applied for it again until we got it. The only difference is I asked her to bring it here.
We brought it here last time. I remember the grant
Yeah.
conversation last time. Yes, that is what I said. That is my opinion. I wasn't saying that is everyone's or that is policy. I was saying, yes, that is my opinion.
Okay.
Forgive me, it's been a long 12 months. I don't recall if we approved a capital project for it last time or not. Maybe you do, I don't know.
It went to town meeting, but it got voted
Okay,
at the free cash.
got it.
Can I ask Chairman Smith to clarify something?
Let me just finish. Okay.
Sure, sorry.
And then, yes, absolutely. Typically, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian Mariah, typically we have 30, 60, maybe 90 days to respond to say, yes, we do or don't accept a grant. It's normally not a sometime in the year you get to spend the money, you can let us know.
Right,
Correct.
I think
It's
what
acceptable.
Scott is saying is that we could accept the grant. I understand what you're getting to.
So I'm getting to, we couldn't wait till February to tell them, yeah, we want it. Yes, we've approved a capital project
Right.
after we got the grant notification in May of the prior year. That's what I'm getting toward.
Okay.
If we this May got a yes, you applied, and yes in May, we can't wait until December, January, February, March to say, okay, yeah, we're good with the project and can finish it in the next 3 months. Like that ship already sailed, but that was
So we
my
bring
point.
it to capital in July.
And it violates the policy. That's all I'm telling you. The policy says, with
But
the
for the
exception
future-
of an emergency, no requests are reviewed.
For the future fiscal year, there's no reason why you can't bring it.
Then the money's gone. No, the future fiscal,
I have,
it's not in cycle. I believe it does refer to it. I think
Yeah.
capital's kind of loosely talked about needing to go through all that. And so I'm not going to try to fix the policy or go through all the nuance tonight, but just that it kind of, we haven't been following all of it. It's not a new this year thing. It's a holistic thing that we need to address. Clarification.
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Okay.
I had thought that your statement was if in a prior year a grant has been supported, it's been applied for, et cetera, and it was not received, that as long as the town funding was there for that grant, it should be moved forward year after year until it is hopefully successful. Did I, because
No, I understand.
I understand that it's
Let
some
me-
splitting of hairs,
No.
but it is a little bit
That's what I-
different between what the two different, and so I want to make sure for my own clarification, I'm understanding what the meaning was.
Assuming the capital request was approved as well, just to make clear, if the capital request was approved and we moved forward with applying for the grant, I would assume it was outstanding. I did say, and the funding was secured, then it was basically an open continue to apply. After something that Brian followed up with, I did say, let me rephrase that, I didn't quite say what I meant, which was, We may not have gotten the funding yet, but if the capital project was approved, we have it on the plan and on the timeline to move forward. So yes, Scott's right, that you
Okay.
were also right, that's what I said the first time, but I walked back the funding approval part.
Okay,
Because we may not know what that match is, so we may not have gone for the funding yet.
thank you, I misunderstood, thank you.
It's all good. Both are right. We will obviously continue discussions on this in general in the future, on how we move forward in a better, more organized manner on these issues, because it's clear it's not clear. That being said, there's a motion and a second on going ahead and applying for this. Does anybody happen to recall if we, never mind, I'm good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And just for clarity for the team, because I stand by what I said, if we approved the project in the past as a capital planning, then I still believe it should continue to be until we decide otherwise. So
So then I would,
it also makes me question, why do we have the request? If it's already an approved request. And the only reason I think we have it is because this year we said we're basically reevaluating everything to some degree because of where we're at. So, yes, you had a question or comment?
it just,
Okay. Fair enough.
no, I did. So then I would like clarity from the Board of Selectmen as to what the process will be if capital planning does not support the request this year.
Can I answer Ben's question before? Is you can withdraw your application. So if we were to meet and say, we don't want to put it on the capital plan, and it's due on February 1st, and we make the decision on March 1st, we can just contact the sponsor and withdraw the application. I mean, that's a possibility.
I mean, I'll look to my fellow board members. I would assume the board would want to hear that that was not recommended and then decide what to do from
have
there.
that discussion
Such
then.
as,
Right,
such
right.
as retracting it. Or at least talk through the pros and cons and why that's the recommendation and then decide what to do from there.
Okay.
Unless more you want to add to that?
Not this time.
Anything else for tonight? Save the best for last. Excuse me. All right. No other business? Then I will adjourn. I will make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.